Chapter 1008. There is probably no one in the entire North Star domain who wouldn't be apprehensive of a quasi-saint sect. Of course, this included this beast race saint. Even though he was a saint, he was still nothing in front of a quasi-sage sect. Furthermore, he wanted to attack a saint of a quasi-sage sect. This was clearly courting death. He did not doubt Xiao Chen's words. Judging from the combat strength of Xiao Chun and the other two, he believed that Xiao Chun was telling the truth. The three of them were all saints of quasi-sage sections. If it were any other time, the beast race saint would probably retreat in the face of difficulties. However, he decided to take the risk in the face of the temptation of the pure-blood dragon race's bloodline. Although killing a saint of a quasi-sage sect would definitely infuriate a quasi-sage sect and cause them to be hunted down endlessly, the beast race saint felt that everything was worth it for the sake of the pure-blood dragon race's bloodline power. In the worst-case scenario, he could just kill Xiao Chun and Chun Ling, seize Long Qing's bloodline power, and flee to a faraway place. By then, he could refine the bloodline power of the pure-blooded dragon clan and find enough origin power. This beast clan saint firmly believed that he could definitely break through the realm of quasi-saint. At that time, as a quasi-sage, he would have the capital to be fearless even in the face of a quasi-sage sect. It was all because of the temptation. The pure-blood dragon race's bloodline power was too tempting. For this, he would not hesitate to infuriate a quasi-sage sect. The killing intent in his eyes increased instead of decreasing. Just as the beast race saint was about to strike and kill Xiao Chun and Chun Ling, a spatial crack appeared in the distant sky. Then, two terrifying auras suddenly emanated from the spatial crack. Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with joy when he sensed the two auras that far exceeded the saint realm. Xiao Chen was too familiar with these two auras. If it was not Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie, who could it be? Sure enough, Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie slowly walked out of the spatial crack along with the appearance of these two auras. He had rushed all the way here and finally caught up. When Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie appeared, the beast race saint's face was ashen. As a true saint of the current era, how could this beast race saint not know that Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie, who had suddenly appeared before him, were a pair of quasi-saint saints? His face was ashen and his eyes were filled with fear. Without any hesitation, his first reaction was to run. Therefore, before Xiao Sheng and Jian Wushuang could say anything, the beast saint turned around and fled into the distance. However, seeing this, Xiao Sheng snorted coldly and said, "Don't you think it's a little too late to run now?" As he spoke, an invisible wave spread out from Xiao Sheng's body. At the same time, he reached out and grabbed at the air. The beast race saint was unable to resist at all and was captured by Xiao Sheng. However, the beast race saint had just broken through to the saint realm and hadn't even stabilized his cultivation base. In addition, he had fought Xiao Chun and the other two for a long time, so he naturally didn't have much ability to resist in front of Xiao Sheng. Although the beast race saint was still struggling with all his might, it was useless, and he was captured by Xiao Sheng. Xiao Sheng looked at the beast race saint and said indifferently, "You want to kill a chosen in my sacred palace? Do you think you can escape? Sacred palace?" The beast race saint exclaimed in horror when he heard Xiao Sheng's words. Sacred palace? You're from the sacred palace? He had found it strange before. Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie were clearly from the human race, but they were quasi-saints supreme venerates. Now that he heard Xiao Sheng claim to be from the sacred palace, it wasn't strange at all. The news of the emergence of a quasi-saint sect in the human race had already spread throughout the Taishan continent. Although not everyone on the Taishan continent knew about the existence of the sacred palace, it was basically known to everyone in the vicinity of Yinfeng Mansion. After all, the rise of a quasi-saint sect was definitely a big deal for the North Star boundary. The beast race saint had also heard about the sacred palace. Now that he saw the two patriarchs of the sacred palace, Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie, he knew that the rumors about the sacred palace were true. The beast race saint already knew what was going to happen to him now that the patriarchs of the sacred palace had arrived in person. Escaping in front of two quasi-saint supreme venerates was a luxury. Therefore, the beast race saint didn't say anything else after being captured by Xiao Sheng. The outcome was already decided, and it was useless to say anything more. Seeing that the beast race saint had nothing to say, Xiao Sheng couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He struck out with his palm and killed the beast race saint on the spot. He easily killed the beast race saint. Blood mist filled the sky, and rain fell from the sky. The saint had fallen. Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie didn't care about this. After breaking through to the quasi-saint realm, Xiao Sheng's mentality had naturally changed. In Xiao Sheng's eyes, saints were nothing special. After killing the beast saint, Meng Jie killed the black python. Xiao Sheng came before Xiao Chun and the other two. He looked at Long Qing and said slowly, "Don't worry, Long Qing. We have to be more careful in the future." Xiao Sheng already knew that Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon. He also guessed why the beast race saint attacked Xiao Chun and the others. Long Qing nodded slightly. The danger situation was easily resolved with Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie's arrival. Qin Shiru and the others also returned to Xiao Chen's side. Seeing that the three girls weren't in any danger, the group left after swallowing healing pills. Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie weren't in a hurry to leave. On the way, Xiao Sheng also asked Xiao Chun and the others where they were going. In response, Xiao Chun also told Xiao Sheng that they were going to the Cloud State City to participate in the Cloud State Youth Gathering. When they heard that Xiao Chun and the others were going to the Cloud State City, Xiao Sheng and the others were also going to the Cloud State City, so they naturally hurried along. With Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie, the two quasi-sage great venerables, there was no need to worry about their safety. They rushed to the Cloud State City. It took them a whole month to arrive at the Cloud State City. There was still half a month left before the Cloud State Youth Gathering. There was still plenty of time. Standing outside the Cloud State City, Xiao Chun and the others were attracted by the city's prosperity. It was a famous city in the entire Taishan continent. It was indeed worthy of its name. No one would have thought that the Cloud State capital was built on top of a mountain. There were a total of 18 mountain peaks, which were like 18 pillars that supported the entire Cloud State capital. With the 18 huge mountains as pillars, a huge city was built on the top of the mountains, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1009. This city was built above the clouds. This was the Cloud State capital. Martial artists could fly directly to the gates of the Cloud State capital. As for those ordinary people without cultivation, there was a short-distance transmission array at the foot of the mountain. They could use this transmission array to enter the Cloud State capital. Surrounded by clouds and mist, Xiao Chun couldn't help but sigh as he stood outside the gates of the Cloud Prefecture City. How extravagant, to build such a city with a mountain as a pillar. Unlike other cities, the Cloud Prefecture City didn't have any city walls because it was built above the clouds. There were only a few entrances and exits, which were commonly known as city gates. They weren't interrogated. After paying the entrance fee, the group entered the Cloud Prefecture City. Shouts constantly echoed in their ears. As the center of the Cloud Prefecture City was naturally prosperous. However, Xiao Chun didn't feel anything special about it. After all, Xiao Chun had seen many such prosperous cities. The only thing that made Xiao Chun sigh was probably the city of Cloud State itself. After all, which city would be built on the clouds without relying on the power of rune matrices? After strolling around the Cloud Prefecture City for a while, the group met up with Saint Mu Tian and the others who had arrived earlier. Because Xiao Chun and the others had to stay behind to participate in the Cloud Prefecture Youth Gathering, Xiao Sheng and the others didn't stay long in the Cloud Prefecture City. They only stayed for 3 days before Xiao Sheng and the others left. According to Xiao Sheng, they were going to make a trip to the Supreme Divine Sect. Although they said they were going to pay a visit, Xiao Chun knew that things weren't that simple. The other 6 quasi-sacred sects definitely wouldn't ignore the rise of the Sacred Palace. As such, Xiao Sheng and the others must have a deeper reason for going to the Supreme Divine Sect. As for what it was nothing more than benefits. If the Sacred Palace wanted to have a place in the North Star boundary, they needed to have their own status and interests. Therefore, they naturally needed to negotiate with the other 6 quasi-sage sections. After Xiao Sheng and the rest left, Xiao Chun and the rest continued to stay in Yinzhou City. Compared to Yinfeng City, there were more interesting things in Yinzhou City, which naturally piqued the interest of Qin Shu and the rest. They were enjoying a rare moment of peace in the Cloud State capital. At the same time, as the Cloud State Youth Gathering approached, more and more people rushed to the Cloud State capital. Most of them were outstanding figures of the younger generation. It was indeed worthy of being called the top gathering of the younger generation in the Cloud State. It was not difficult to see this from the increasing number of young warriors in the Cloud State's capital in recent days. Many of them did not have the qualifications to participate in the Yunzhou Youth Gathering. However, this did not dampen their enthusiasm. After all, it was a gathering of the younger generation. Anyone would want to watch it with their own eyes. They wanted to see what was so special about the top young talents in the Cloud State. In addition, the Supreme Divine Sect's Holy Son would be participating in the Cloud Plains Qing-Ying Gathering. As the Qing-Ying Gathering approached, the news gradually spread among the younger generation of the Cloud Plain at an extremely exaggerated speed. The youths of the Yunzhou Yuying Gathering was already an irresistible attraction for the younger generation. With the participation of the Holy Son of the Supreme Deity Sect, it was even more tempting. Therefore, as the news spread, more and more young geniuses of the Yunzhou Yuying gathering madly in the Yunzhou capital. As a result, the Yunzhou capital was under martial law. With so many people gathering in the Cloud State capital, the city governor's mansion was afraid that something would happen. After all, these young people were all proud and arrogant. When they gathered together, fighting was inevitable. Once a fight broke out in the city, it would definitely affect the city. Therefore, the city governor's mansion increased the patrols and prohibited anyone from fighting to the death in the city. If anyone wanted to spar, they could only go to the martial arts practice field in the city governor's mansion. On the streets, groups of city governor's mansion guards patrolled back and forth. Basically, there were guards on every street. In the restaurants and inns, there were basically young warriors everywhere. Everyone sat together in groups of 3 to 5, drinking and chatting while showing off to each other. Of course, they were mostly talking about the Yunzhou Yuying Association. For example, who would be the Supreme Divine Sect's Saint Child participate in the Yuying Association? This was the question that everyone was most concerned about. At the same time, they also received news that the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect would be participating in the youth gathering. At this moment, Xiao Chun and a group of people were sitting in a private room in a restaurant. While drinking, Xiao Chun chuckled and said, "The chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect is also coming. Looks like we were right to come to the youth gathering this time. Big brother, do you think the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, Kusaw, will come?" There were a total of 7 chosen and saintesses in the Supreme Divine Sect. However, Xiao Chun and the rest only knew of Kusaw. They remembered that he was ranked 3rd among the chosen and saintesses of the Supreme Divine Sect. The last time Qinling fought with him, the two of them were evenly matched. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Qinling's eyes flashed with a hint of battle intent. However, it was quickly concealed. He took a deep breath and said with a chuckle, "If he comes, I would like to fight with him again. It's a pity that we didn't have a clear winner last time. I say, big brother, shouldn't you step aside this time? Let me and second sister experience the skills of the Supreme Divine Sect's Holy Son." Hearing this, Xiao Chun joked with a smile. As Xiao Chun, he naturally wanted to fight with the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect. Xiao Chun hadn't fought with the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect before. Naturally, he was curious about their strength. Time passed day by day. The day of the youth gathering was getting closer and closer. At the same time, more and more young talents from the Cloud Prefecture were gathering in the Cloud Prefecture City. 3 days before the youth gathering, the entire Cloud Prefecture City was already packed with people. Looking around, there were young masters and ladies dressed in embroidered clothes everywhere. These people all had extraordinary identities. If they were not disciples of big clans, they were elite disciples of big sections. Usually, in their own territories, These people were praised by tens of thousands of people. But now, in the capital of Cloud State, they could be seen everywhere, but there were definitely a lot of them. It was also because of the gathering of so many young talents that these arrogant young masters and ladies learned to restrain themselves. After all, they weren't stupid. In the Cloud Prefecture city, anyone who dared to be arrogant because of their identity would be an idiot. This was because there were plenty of people with higher status and talent than you in the capital of Yinzhou. No one knew that the person you met on the street might be the young master of a big family, or the saint's son or saintess of a saint sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:10. In the entire Cloud Prefecture, almost all of the outstanding talents of the younger generation had gathered in the Cloud Prefecture's capital. There were only 3 days left until the start of the Young Heroes Gathering, and those who had obtained the quota for the Young Heroes Gathering had arrived in the Cloud Prefecture's capital one after another. The city governor's mansion of the Cloud Prefecture would naturally arrange accommodations for those who had passed the tests and obtained the quota for the Young Heroes Gathering. Therefore, when they entered the Cloud Prefecture's capital, they were brought to the city governor's mansion. At that time, they would naturally use the teleportation array in the city governor's mansion to arrive at the Jade Flower Forest to participate in the Young Heroes Gathering. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Early in the morning, countless figures soared into the sky from the Cloud Prefecture's capital. It was obvious that these people were all young disciples. Since they were all leaving the Cloud Prefecture's capital in the same direction, there was no doubt that these people were all heading towards the Jade Flower Forest. The Young Heroes Gathering was not held in the Cloud Prefecture's capital, but in the Jade Flower Forest. However, the Jade Flower Forest was not far from the Cloud Prefecture's capital, as it was only 100 meters away. It would take a cultivator at most half an hour to reach the Jade Flower Forest by flying. From today onwards, those who were qualified to participate in the Young Heroes Gathering did not need to rush. They could directly take the teleportation array from the city governor's mansion of the Cloud Prefecture to the Jade Flower Forest. As for those who came to join in the fun, they naturally did not have such a privilege and could only rush to the Jade Flower Forest by themselves. Furthermore, because they did not have the qualifications to participate in the Young Heroes Gathering, they could not enter the Jade Flower Forest and could only stay in the outer area of the Jade Flower Forest. Sometimes, it was very strange. These people could not even enter the Jade Flower Forest, let alone participate in the Young Heroes Gathering. However, this did not stop them from joining in the fun. On the contrary, they were not tired of it. Thousands of young talents from the Cloud Prefecture rushed towards the Jade Flower Forest. In almost an instant, the bustling Cloud Prefecture's capital seemed to have quieted down. The young masters and young ladies that could be seen everywhere on the streets had collectively disappeared in the early morning of this day. While all the young geniuses were rushing towards the Jade Flower Forest, 3 young men in golden robes with the symbol of a saint on the north side of their robes walked out with large strides from an inn called Cloudfall. Moreover, one of the young men was accompanied by 3 devastatingly beautiful young women. There was no doubt that this group of people was naturally Xiao Chen's group. They had changed into the robes of the Sacred Palace. Originally, they had to rely on their identities as Sacred Palace chosen to participate in the Yinzhou Youth Gathering, so there was no need for Xiao Chen's group to continue hiding their identities. Since that was the case, he might as well put on the robes of the Sacred Palace's chosen and give the Sacred Palace some face. As the saying went, clothes make the man, and saddles make the horse. The Sacred Palace robe had been personally refined by Xiao Sheng and the other quasi-sage great venerates. Not only was its defensive power abnormal, but also improved one's temperament imperceptibly. Xiao Chun and his siblings were already extraordinary in appearance, especially Xiao Chun. Now that he was wearing the Sacred Palace Chosen's robes, he was even more eye-catching. As soon as they walked out of the inn, the surrounding cultivators all turned their attention to Xiao Chen's group. Many of them had already begun to whisper among themselves. Xiao Chen didn't care about the discussions of the people around him. With a smile on his face, he said to Qin Shiru and the other 2 girls, "My 3 beauties, let's go." Today we'll go and see what kind of paradise the Jade Flower Forest is like. Xiao Qin joked. Qin Shiru and the other two girls were also secretly looking forward to it. The three girls had long wanted to take a look at the Jade Flower Forest. Now, the day of the youth gathering had finally arrived. As soon as they finished speaking, the group flew out of the Yunzhou provincial city and rushed towards the Jade Flower Forest. Watching the group leave, a cultivator couldn't help but comment. Look at the direction they're heading towards. Could they be the young talents participating in this year's youth gathering? Are you stupid? The participants of the youth gathering are all staying in the City Lord Mansion. How could they possibly appear here? Another person beside him said, That's true, but the golden robes they're wearing are really cool. You don't know anything. That golden robe is obviously not an ordinary item. It's at least a heaven-grade defensive artifact. Among the crowd, there were naturally people with extraordinary eyesight who could tell that the Sacred Palace Chosen's robe was a defensive artifact. However, no one would have thought that although the Sacred Palace Chosen's robe was indeed a defensive artifact, it was not only a heaven-grade defensive artifact, but also a saint-grade defensive artifact. Xiao Qin's group rushed towards the Jade Flower Forest. As they had set off a little late, many people had already gathered outside the Jade Flower Forest while Xiao Qin's group was still on their way. The crowd sat in groups of 3 to 5 and spontaneously set up tables and chairs outside the Jade Flower Forest. It was like a large-scale gathering of the younger generation. Although they couldn't enter the Jade Flower Forest, they didn't say anything in front of the crowd. At the same time, they chatted about the youth gathering. Outside the Jade Flower Forest, the crowd spontaneously gathered together to drink and chat. Inside the Jade Flower Forest, there were beautiful jade flower trees all around. The trees weren't tall, only about 3 meters tall. On the branches, pink flowers bloomed one after another. In the middle of the beautiful sea of flowers, there was a huge open space where close to 100 flower pavilions were built. That's right, flower pavilions. These flower pavilions were built with flower petals. At this moment, these flower pavilions were already filled with people. These people were the geniuses who had proudly passed the various tests and were qualified to participate in the youth gathering. However, at this moment, the young talents in the various flower pavilions couldn't help but look at the flower pavilion closest to them. The area of this flower pavilion was clearly much larger than the other flower pavilions. However, at this moment, there wasn't a single person in sight. Combined with the gazes of the crowd, it wasn't hard to guess that there were still people who hadn't arrived. The people who could make so many people wait quietly were naturally the 2 saints of the Supreme Deity sect who were rumored to be participating in the youth gathering. The fact that the Supreme Deity sect saints would be participating in the youth gathering wasn't a secret to the crowd. Therefore, at this very moment, everyone was quietly waiting for the arrival of the Supreme Deity sect saints. To them, it was indeed a great honor to be able to interact with the Supreme Deity sect saints in such close proximity. Although they were the most elite of the younger generation in the Cloud region, the gap between them and the Supreme Deity sect saints was still obvious. Today, they had the opportunity to interact with the Supreme Deity sect saints. Everyone was secretly excited. Some of them even fantasized that if they were chosen by the Supreme Deity sect saints, wouldn't they soar into the sky, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 10-11. To be able to interact with the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect was something that was hard to refuse for everyone present. However, not everyone present thought the same way. At least, the 3 chosen of the Fallen River Saint sect were very calm. Perhaps before, they would be filled with anticipation like everyone else. However, at this moment, they did not care much about the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect. As for the reason, it was very simple. The chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect had a very high status, great strength, and heaven-defying talent. However, to the 3 chosen of the Fallen River Saint sect, the chosen of the Sacred Palace was definitely not inferior to the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect. Because they had already interacted with Xiao Chun and the other Sacred Palace chosen, they did not have much expectation for the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect. As everyone waited quietly, Two beams of light shot into the sky from the originally empty flower pavilion. As the light faded, two young men, wearing the robes of the Supreme Divine Sect, appeared in front of everyone. It was a man and a woman, both wearing the robes of the Supreme Deity Sect. Seeing the two of them, everyone was stunned. The Holy Son and Holy Daughter of the Supreme Deity Sect had really appeared. After being stunned for a moment, everyone stood up and bowed. "Greetings, Chosen." The two Chosens merely nodded slightly in response to everyone's respectful greetings. The male Chosen waved his hand and gestured for everyone to take a seat before he sat down in the flower pavilion. If Xiao Chun and the others were present, they would definitely recognize this male Chosen. He was the third Chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, Ku Saw, who had been to the heavenly Chun continent and fought with Chun Ling. They did not expect Kusuo to appear at the Yinzhou Youth Gathering. Xiao Chun had guessed correctly. As for the Chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect sitting next to Kusuo, she had a cold and elegant appearance. Although her appearance was not as beautiful as Qin Shru and the other two women, she was definitely considered a first-class beauty. Coupled with her identity as the Chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, there was no doubt that many men would go crazy over her. Just thinking about it, to be able to gain the favor of a Chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect was definitely the wish of all men. Her name was Jia Lingya, the fourth saintess of the Supreme Deity Sect. With the appearance of Ku Suo and Jia Lingya, this year's youth gathering officially began. Perhaps it was because of the presence of the two holy sons and holy daughters. Everyone was obviously a little nervous. Seeing this, Kusuo said indifferently, "Don't worry about us. Lingya and I came here for our own purpose. We found a saint's secret land that no one has ever entered before. The higher-ups of the sect have given Lingya and I full authority to deal with it. Therefore, we came to the Young Heroes meeting in Yunzhou to pick some people to explore the secret land with Lingya and I. There will be 10 people. After the Young Heroes meeting is over, Lingya and I will make a choice." Now that things had come to this, there was nothing to hide. Ku Suo directly told them about the Saint's secret realm. Hearing this, everyone present couldn't remain calm. To be able to train with the holy sons of the Supreme Deity Sect, and to go to a Saint's secret land that no one had ever found before. Everyone knew what a Saint realm that had never been discovered represented. It represented that the treasures and inheritances within it hadn't been touched by anyone. Moreover, as the first batch of people to enter it, they had no doubt that their gains would absolutely be the greatest. After all, in any secret land, the first batch of people to enter would always gain the most. As more and more people entered, the treasures would naturally decrease. It was also because it was an undiscovered Saint's secret land that Kusuo and Jia Lingya were interested in it. Otherwise, as the holy sons and holy daughters of the Supreme Deity Sect, they naturally wouldn't be interested in a Saint's secret land that had been discovered and entered by many people. With Kusuo's words, everyone present quickly became excited. Among them, there were people who took the initiative to come forward and ask others to spar. The Young Heroes Association was nothing more than a gathering of people to spar with each other. However, there was naturally a bet for such a spar. As for how much it was completely up to the two sides. Someone threw a brick to attract Jade, and the atmosphere quickly became lively. Looking at the two young geniuses who were fighting fiercely, Duo Lingya said with a lack of interest, "Kusuo, I don't understand. Why do you have to come to the Cloud Prefecture to choose people? There are so many disciples in the Supreme Deity Sect. Can't they satisfy you? Haha, I'm a little tired of the Supreme Deity Sect disciples every time. Let's take a look at the Cloud Prefecture's Young Heroes Association this time. Don't you think it's different?" Kusuo chuckled when he heard Jia Lingya's words. Because it's fun, Jia Lingya was speechless when she heard Kusuo's words. After the Young Heroes Association officially began, Xiao Chun and the others finally arrived outside the Hundred Flowers Ridge. Outside the entrance of the Hundred Flowers Ridge, many young geniuses from the Cloud Prefecture had already begun drinking and chatting. From time to time, there would even be people sparring with each other. It was a lively scene. It was in this lively atmosphere that some people discovered Xiao Chun and the others. Immediately, many men were attracted by the appearance of Qin Shu and the other two girls. Some of them even wanted to approach and strike up a conversation, but they were quickly pulled back by the people beside them. "Why are you pulling me back?" the group of people asked in confusion when they were stopped by the people beside them. Someone explained, "You really don't know what's good for you. Take a good look at the three people in golden robes." After being reminded, the crowd finally turned their attention to Xiao Chun and the other two girls. They were wearing the robes of the sacred palaces chosen. Xiao Chun and the other two girls had an extraordinary aura. The crowd sized them up but couldn't find any clues for a moment. Just as they were puzzled, the people beside them whispered, "Look at the back of their robes. Don't you see the word sacred embroidered on it? If I'm not wrong, they should be from the sacred palace." Moreover, based on the extraordinary appearance of their golden robes, I think they should at least be sacred palace's prospective chosen. Sacred palace? When they heard these two words, all the young geniuses present fell into silence. News of what the sacred palace had done during this period had already spread throughout the Cloud Prefecture. In addition, these people had extraordinary identities, so they were naturally more informed than ordinary people. They all knew that a quasi-saint sect had finally appeared in the human race, and its name was the Sacred Palace. More and more people turned their attention to Xiao Chun and the others after hearing the people around them. Today was the day of the Cloud Prefecture's Young Heroes Gathering, and the chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect would be participating. What did it mean for the people from the Sacred Palace to suddenly arrive? Everyone's thoughts began to run wild. It was a meeting between two quasi-saint sections. However, they didn't know what status Xiao Chun and the other two girls had in the Sacred Palace. If they were Sacred Palaces chosen, then there would be a good show to watch. Just the thought of two quasi-saint sects chosen meeting was exciting enough. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10-12. The rise of the Sacred Palace was no secret, at least in the Cloud Prefecture. The destruction of the Heavenly Ghost sect was also the reason why the Sacred Palace was known to the world. Everyone was curious about the Sacred Palace because at this moment, the world didn't know much about the Sacred Palace. They only knew that the Sacred Palace was a new quasi-saint sect founded by the human race. Countless eyes fell on Xiao Chun and the others, but because Xiao Chun and the other two were wearing Sacred Palace robes, no one dared to act rashly. Although they didn't know much about the Sacred Palace, as long as a force was associated with the name of a quasi-saint sect, it was an existence that couldn't be provoked. They weren't disciples of the Supreme Deity sect and didn't have a quasi-saint sect backing them. Although many of them had high status, they were still far from the Sacred Palace. Therefore, everyone wisely chose to watch quietly. Although they didn't know the identity of Xiao Chun and the others, it was best not to provoke them. Under everyone's gaze, Xiao Chun and the others slowly walked to the entrance of the Jade Flower Forest. However, it was here that a half-step saint expert from the Supreme Deity sect's Cloud Prefecture branch blocked their path. The half-step saint expert frowned slightly. He obviously knew about the Sacred Palace. Moreover, he was a member of the Supreme Deity sect, and his status wasn't low, so he obviously knew more about the Sacred Palace than the others. He already knew that Supreme Sovereign Adam had once led people to the Sacred Palace, but in the end, Supreme Sovereign Adam didn't take action. Instead, he got closer to the Sacred Palace before returning to the Supreme Deity continent. There was only one reason why Supreme Sovereign Adam didn't take action personally, and that was that the Sacred Palace wasn't weak. Because he knew this, the half-step saint expert showed a certain amount of respect to Xiao Chun and the others. He obviously didn't want to offend the Sacred Palace. "Are you all from the Sacred Palace?" The half-saint expert took the initiative to ask Xiao Chun, who was leading the group. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled and nodded. "That's right. I am the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, Xiao Chun. This is my big brother, the second chosen of the Sacred Palace, Chunling. This is my second sister, the third chosen of the Sacred Palace, Long Qing." He took the initiative to introduce himself. When he heard Xiao Chen's words, the half-saint couldn't remain calm, and the crowd and the surroundings instantly clamored. Originally, they had hoped that Xiao Chun and the others would be holy princes of the Saint Palace. If that was the case, then the Cloud Prefecture's youth gathering would be very lively. The holy princes of the two great quasi-sage sects would gather. At first, they only held on to this hope. However, at this moment, after Xiao Chun spoke, everyone could no longer remain calm. The first, second, and third chosen of the Sacred Palace were all gathered here. Such a lineup could only be described as extremely luxurious. After introducing himself, without waiting for the half-step saint expert to reply, Xiao Chun continued. We heard that the Cloud Prefecture's youth gathering is being held, so we specially came here today. Please forgive us for disturbing you. The half-step saint expert of the Supreme Divine Sect was here to participate in the Cloud Prefecture's youth gathering. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, he spoke. I see. Everyone, please wait for a moment. It was normal that Xiao Chun and the others were not allowed to enter directly. After all, Kusuo and Jialingya, the two saints and the saintess, were present. The half-saint would naturally leave this matter to the two of them and let them make the decision themselves. After gesturing for Xiao Chun and the others to wait for a moment, the half-step saint expert quickly walked into the Jade Flower Forest. At the venue of the youth gathering, two youths were currently engaged in a heated battle, while Kusuo and Jialingya watched on in boredom. To the two of them, such a battle was indeed not worth watching. While the two of them were bored to death, the half-step saint expert came before them, bowed, and truthfully recounted the matter of Xiao Chun and the others. Upon hearing that the chosen of the Sacred Palace had arrived, Kusuo revealed a puzzled expression. The chosen of the Sacred Palace is here? Kusuo didn't expect the chosen of the Sacred Palace to come here. As he spoke, he couldn't help but think of Chunling. The memory of Chunling's strength was still fresh in Kusuo's mind. Compared to Kusuo, Jialingya seemed a little more excited. The chosen of the Sacred Palace? Interesting. Let them in. I want to see if the Sacred Palace's reputation is undeserved. Jialingya had never dealt with the Sacred Palace before, so she was very curious about the chosen of the Sacred Palace. Kusuo didn't object when he heard Jialingya's words. Seeing this, the half-step saint expert quickly walked in. Outside the Jade Flower Forest, Xiao Chun and the others didn't have to wait for long before the half-step saint expert returned and bowed respectfully to Xiao Chun and the others. Everyone, please. He personally invited Xiao Chun and the others into the Jade Flower Forest. As they walked through the Jade Flower Forest, Qin Shru and the other two girls were attracted by the surrounding scenery. It was no wonder that the Jade Flower Forest was so famous in the Cloud Prefecture. The scenery was indeed extremely beautiful. Coupled with the story of the former quasi-saint supreme sovereign, the Jade Flower Forest gave off an indescribable feeling. After passing through the sea of flowers, Xiao Chun and the others finally arrived at the venue of the youth gathering. The young geniuses in the many flower pavilions were a little surprised when they saw Xiao Chun and the others appear. The youth gathering had already begun, but there were people joining in the middle. This had never happened before. The Youthful Association had never added more people in the middle of the battle. Just as the crowd was puzzled, a figure flashed past from the largest flower pavilion and directly appeared on the battlefield. The two youths who were originally in an intense battle could only helplessly stop at this moment. The figure that suddenly appeared in the arena was naturally the third voice of the Supreme Deity Sect, Kusuo. At this moment, Kusuo was standing in the middle of the arena. His eyes were fixed on Chunling, who was on Xiao Chen's left, as he called out in a low voice. Chunling. Kusuo's memory of Chunling was still fresh in his mind. He didn't expect to see Chunling here. Moreover, Chunling had actually come to the Supreme Divine Continent. Hearing Kusuo's words, Chunling smiled bitterly. He looked at Xiao Chun and said, "Third brother, you really have a crow's mouth." Previously, Xiao Chun had said that the Holy Son of the Supreme Divine Sect might not be Kusuo. He didn't expect Xiao Chun to be right. Chunling turned to look at Kusuo and said with a faint smile, "We came to the supreme divine continent to train. We heard about the youth gathering in the Cloud Prefecture, so we came to take a look." Coming to the youth gathering to take a look? Hearing Chunling's words, Kusuo smiled and personally invited Xiao Chun and the others to the flower pavilion that he and Jialing Yao were at. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 10:13. Kusuo had personally invited Xiao Chun and the others into the flower pavilion. Seeing that Kusuo had personally received Xiao Chun and the others, the crowd quickly guessed the identities of Xiao Chun and the others, based on the sacred palace chosen's robes that Xiao Chun and the others wore. The crowd quickly guessed that they were from the sacred palace. Who would have thought that they would be from the sacred palace? Moreover, since Kusuo had personally received them, it was obvious that Xiao Chun and the others were chosen from the sacred palace. That was the only explanation for Kusuo's actions. They didn't expect that even the holy son of the sacred palace would come. Everyone was both surprised and excited. The holy sons of the two great quasi-sage sects gathered together. This was absolutely rare on normal days. As they entered the flower pavilion, Kusuo introduced Jia Lingyao to Xiao Chun and the others. Until now, the sacred palace and the supreme deity sect were not considered enemies. Although they both had some ulterior motives, this was very common between sections. At least until now, both sides had maintained restraint and had not truly clashed with each other. Their relationship was relatively good. Therefore, after getting to know each other, Jia Lingya's beautiful eyes sized up Xiao Chun and the others. Finally, her gaze settled on Xiao Chun and she smiled sweetly. "I didn't expect the first chosen from the sacred palace to come. If I had known, I would have called senior brother Baishur over." Baishur, the first chosen from the supreme deity sect, was fully deserving of his title as the #1 person among the younger generation of the North Star Boundary Shin clan. The corners of Kusuo's mouth involuntarily twitched when he heard that Jia Lingyao wanted to call Baishur over. This crazy woman really wanted to stir up trouble. Given senior brother Baishur's arrogant personality, he would definitely fight with Xiao Chun and the others today. Xiao Chun, Chunling, and Long Qing sat side by side with Kusuo and Jia Lingyao. As for Qin Shiru and the other two girls, they clustered around Xiao Chun. Jia Lingyao had been secretly observing the appearances of Qin Shiru and the other two women. It was the first time she had seen such beautiful women in the human race. For Jia Lingyao, who had always been very confident in her appearance, when facing Qin Shiru and the other two girls, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Therefore, Jia Lingyao also teased Xiao Chun with a smile. "Senior martial brother, Xiao Chun really has good luck with women. It is indeed not shallow." Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun did not refute and nodded calmly. Of course, this was also Xiao Chun's heartfelt words. To be able to gain the favor of Qin Shiru and the other two women, Xiao Chun indeed felt that he had good luck with women. Seeing that Xiao Chun didn't play by the rules, Jia Lingyao was at a loss for words. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded from the nearby pavilion. "You're from the sacred palace? Was it your sacred palace that destroyed the heavenly ghost sect?" Following the voice, a ghost race youth stood proudly on the battle stage between Xiao Chun and the others. His eyes were fixed on Xiao Chun and the others in the pavilion as killing intent constantly gathered in his eyes. He didn't expect that someone would dare to berate Xiao Chun and the others at this time. One must know that Xiao Chun and the others were Kusuo's guests. Such rudeness not only offended Xiao Chun, but also humiliated Kusuo. Sure enough, before Xiao Chun could speak, Kusuo had already said coldly, "Who are you? Get back to where you came from." Kusuo had also heard a little about the Heavenly Ghost sect, but he didn't care at all. It was just a Heavenly Ghost sect, and it wasn't a force of the God race. It didn't matter if it was destroyed. Kusuo shouted coldly, but the Ghost race youth was clearly burning with anger. He actually ignored Kusuo's order and continued to stare at Xiao Chun and the others in the pavilion with overflowing killing intent. Kusuo was a little angry when he saw that the Ghost race youth was indifferent to his order. However, At this moment, Xiao Chun slowly stood up and smiled faintly. Brother Kusuo, it's better if I do it myself since they're looking for me. Without waiting for Kusuo's reply, Xiao Chun took a step forward and instantly appeared on the battle stage, facing the Ghost Race youth. Xiao Chun looked calmly at the Ghost Race youth and said indifferently, "The Heavenly Ghost sect was destroyed by my sacred palace, so what? There was no need to hide it at all. So what if it was the sacred palace that destroyed it?" The Ghost Race youth was completely enraged when he heard Xiao Chen's words. He was furious because he had a brother who was a chosen of the Heavenly Ghost sect. Moreover, he was the first chosen of the Heavenly Ghost sect who had died at Xiao Chen's hands. The Ghost Race youth was extremely sad when he learned of his brother's death. Now that he saw a sacred palace chosen standing in front of him, the hatred buried deep in his heart gushed out uncontrollably. Completely consumed by hatred, the Ghost Race youth had forgotten that Xiao Chun was a sacred palace chosen. He actually challenged Xiao Chun to a battle to the death in front of everyone present. "I want to have a battle to the death with you to avenge my brother's death. A battle of life and death." Once these words were spoken, everyone present was stunned. This young man from the Ghost Clan was actually the first holy son of a saint sect, and his strength was not weak. However, he was only the first holy son of a saint sect, while Xiao Chun was the first holy son of a quasi-sage sect. Anyone with common sense would know the difference between them. However, the Ghost Race youth had challenged Xiao Chun to a battle to the death. This surprised many of the young talents participating in the Young Heroes Association. Wasn't he courting death? Not only the crowd, but even Xiao Chun was taken aback. However, he could clearly feel the Ghost Race youth's strong, killing intent towards him. Xiao Chun said indifferently, "I understand that you want revenge, but you're not my match." The young man wanted to avenge his brother. Xiao Chun could tell from the young man's words that he wanted to avenge his brother. There is nothing wrong with avenging one's brother. Of course, there is nothing wrong with the Sacred Palace not attacking the Heavenly Ghost sect. Therefore, Xiao Chun did not feel that he had done anything wrong. Similarly, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with the Ghost Race youth. However, one had to act according to one's ability to take revenge. The Ghost Race youth was only at the perfect Tao King realm, so it was impossible for him to defeat Xiao Chun. Even if they fought at the same level, Xiao Chun would be able to defeat him. Therefore, Xiao Chun intended to give the Ghost Race youth another chance before the battle began. Unfortunately, the Ghost Race youth did not appreciate Xiao Chun's kindness at all. "There's no need." What? Could it be that a dignified chosen of a sacred palace doesn't dare to have a battle to the death with me? A chosen of a saint sect? Clearly, the Ghost Race youth was completely consumed by hatred. Xiao Chun remained expressionless when he heard this. He still nodded calmly. "All right, let's fight if you want. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." In a chapter. Chapter 10:14. The young man from the Ghost Clan was determined to get his revenge. Xiao Chun naturally agreed to his request. Xiao Chun didn't take the Ghost Clan youth's life and death battle to heart. He wasn't enough to put Xiao Chun in any danger. He directly nodded his head in agreement. Seeing this, a terrifying aura immediately erupted from the Ghost Clan youth. The murderous intent in his eyes also reached its peak at this moment. However, Xiao Chun remained as immovable as a mountain in the face of this terrifying aura. He wasn't affected at all. No one had expected such a thing to happen. A holy son of a saint-grade sect actually dared to challenge a holy son of a quasi-grade sect. This was indeed unexpected. However, when faced with such a development, other than being surprised, the people present were even more excited. Their hearts were faintly filled with excitement. The Sacred Palace was mysterious to begin with, and the chosen of the Sacred Palace was naturally even more mysterious. Therefore, many young geniuses present wanted to see just how strong the chosen of the Sacred Palace, a quasi-saint sect that had recently risen to prominence, was. Everyone was curious whether the chosen of the Sacred Palace was as strong as the chosen of an old quasi-saint sect, like the Supreme Divine Sect, and whether they had reached the same level of existence. Of course, No one thought that Xiao Chen would lose. After all, anyone who could become a chosen of a quasi-saint sect naturally couldn't be a pretty face. Strength was definitely required. What everyone cared about was how strong Xiao Chen was, what level he had reached, and how big the gap was between him and the chosen of an old quasi-saint sect like the Supreme Divine Sect. They hoped that the Ghost Clan chosen would be able to probe Xiao Chen's strength. This was what everyone looked forward to the most. Under everyone's expectant gazes, the Ghost Clan chosen made the first move on the battle stage. He didn't hold back in the slightest. Ghost Chi immediately filled the stage as he slammed his palm forward. A giant white bone palm, condensed from Ghost Chi, descended from the sky and ruthlessly blasted toward Xiao Chen. White bone seal. With a furious roar, the palm slammed down. Xiao Chen had no intention of dodging the Ghost Clan Holy Sun's attack. His storage ring flashed, and the black dragon sword instantly appeared in his hand. Xiao Chen stood upright with his sword in hand, looking at the Ghost Race Holy Sun's white bone seal. Just as the white bone seal was about to hit Xiao Chen, who had not made a move since the beginning, finally made his move. He slashed out with his sword, and the tip of his sword slashed out, colliding violently with the white bone palm. He didn't dodge or defend. He didn't even move his feet. He just casually swung his sword. However, to everyone's surprise, the giant white bone palm shattered after it collided with Xiao Chen's sword. Xiao Chen was able to casually crush the Sacred Child's full-powered attack. Xiao Chen did not stop there. He lashed out with his sword again. The blade flashed, and the young man from the Ghost Clan knew that things were not going well. However, it was too late for him to retreat. He could only focus on defense. When the second attack landed, the Ghost Clan Holy Sun was blasted away. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. Clearly, he was heavily injured. Xiao Chen muttered to himself indifferently after destroying the white bone seal with a single strike and heavily injuring the Ghost Clan Holy Sun with a single strike. Looks like I've overestimated you. Xiao Chen had indeed overestimated this holy child of the Ghost Clan. This person's strength was not even comparable to that of the first holy child of the Heavenly Ghost Clan. At the very least, the first holy child of the Heavenly Ghost Clan was able to block Xiao Chen's first two strikes. However, this young man from the Ghost Clan could not even block his second strike. Having lost all interest, Xiao Chen slashed out with his sword again. Sword intent at the level of perfection surged out with this strike, and it shot towards the Ghost Clan Holy Sun with lightning speed. Without the slightest ability to resist, the Ghost Clan Holy Sun was directly slashed down by Xiao Chen in the air. His body was also cleaved in half. In just 3 strikes, the outcome had already been decided. Faced with such an outcome, many of the young geniuses present were somewhat stunned. They originally wanted to use this battle to see the strength of the Sacred Palace Holy Sun. Who would have thought that the Ghost Clan Holy Sun would be killed by Xiao Chen in just 3 strikes? Furthermore, anyone could tell that Xiao Chen had only casually swung those 3 swords. He had only used his sword will in the last one, but he had not used any martial arts techniques. The outcome of the battle had been decided without the use of any martial skills that the human clan was so proud of. As such, this battle clearly had no reference value, and the strength of the Sacred Palace Holy Sun was still a mystery. However, the more curious they were, the more shocked they were. Being able to kill a holy son of a sacred sect without even using a martial skill was enough to prove that Xiao Chen was unfathomable. Like everyone else, Zhao Ya's gaze also fell on the battle stage. Looking at Xiao Chen's back, she said with some disappointment, "What a piece of trash. He couldn't even test his strength." Zhao Ya also wanted to test Xiao Chen's strength, but unfortunately, the Ghost Clan Holy Sun was too useless and did not manage to probe Xiao Chen's true strength at all. Hearing Zhao Ya's words, Kusuo unhurriedly took a sip of wine and said indifferently, "You're thinking too much. You're the one who's thinking too much. A mere chosen of a saint sect wants to test the strength of the first chosen of the Sacred Palace. Isn't that just a fool's dream? Kusuo had long known that this would be the result. Wanting to use a mere holy son of a sacred sect to test Xiao Qin's strength was indeed the ravings of a fool. It was completely impossible. Kusuo had once exchanged blows with Qinling, so he knew that the Sacred Palace Holy Sons were not just for show. This could be seen from Qinling's performance. From Qinling alone, it could be seen that the strength of the 10 great holy sons and holy daughters of the Sacred Palace was absolutely solid. They had definitely reached the threshold of a holy son of a quasi-saint sect. Jialingyao was not surprised by this result. Hearing Kusuo's words, she curled her lips but did not say anything more. She also knew that Kusuo was right. While the two of them were whispering to each other, Xiao Chun, who was on the fighting ring, looked at the other holy sons of the Ghost Clan and shouted softly, "Is there anyone else who wants to avenge the Heavenly Ghost Sect? Anyone can come up together." As soon as Xiao Chun said this, the other holy sons of the Ghost Clan all fell silent. Avenge the Heavenly Ghost Sect? What a joke. At this point, everyone knew that the Sacred Palace Holy Sons were probably existences on the same level as the Supreme Divine Sect Holy Son. Who would dare to avenge the Heavenly Ghost Sect? That would simply be courting death, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:15. No one responded to Xiao Chun. Everyone present chose to remain silent. Seeing this, Xiao Chun did not show the slightest arrogance. Seeing that no one responded, he sheathed his sword and slowly walked off the battle stage and returned to the pavilion. When Xiao Chun returned to the pavilion, Kusuo raised his cup and smiled. Senior brother Xiao Chin's sword technique is truly divine. I am ashamed of my inferiority. Senior brother Kusuo, you must be joking. How can my little strength catch your eye? Hearing this, Xiao Qin only smiled slightly and replied in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. He then raised his cup and drained it with Kusuo. No one dared to provoke Xiao Chun and the Sacred Palace again. After this battle, the reputation of the Sacred Palace Chosen would soon spread among the younger generation of the Cloud State. At that time, no one would dare to look down on the Chosen of the Sacred Palace, much less the Sacred Palace. Everyone would treat the Sacred Palace as a true secondary saint sect. Next, the many young talents participating in the Young Heroes meeting began to exchange pointers again. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others were not interested in this, including Kusuo and Jialingyao. Because they were not interested, Qin Shiru and the other girls, including Long Qing, also went to the Jade Flower Forest to play. Only Kusuo, Jialingyao, Xiao Chun, and Qinling were left in the pavilion. At this time, Kusuo also said to Xiao Chun in a seemingly unobtrusive manner, "Senior brother Xiao Chun, Lingya and I have discovered a saint's secret realm. I wonder if senior brother Xiao Chun is interested in exploring together?" The saint's secret realm was no longer a secret. Kusuo guessed that Xiao Chun and the others must have known something, so he took the initiative to speak at this time. Xiao Chun and Qinling smiled at each other when they heard Kusuo's words. Then Xiao Chun said, "Of course we are interested in the saint's secret realm, but since we are joining forces, shouldn't we be honest with each other?" Xiao Chun and Qinling had discussed the matter of Kusuo and Jia Lingya discovering the saint's secret realm many times, and they felt that there was something fishy about it. It was very simple. Since they discovered an unexplored saint realm, then there was no need for Kusuo and Jialingyao to release the news with such fanfare, right? Wasn't this asking everyone to go and get a piece of the pie? Don't say stupid things like the saint's secret realm is under control. Think about it. Now that the news of the saint's secret realm has spread, there will definitely be many people who will take the initiative to go there. With each additional person, there would be more competition. Xiao Qin didn't believe that Kusuo and the others didn't know how fierce the competition would be. Kusuo and Jialingyao's abnormal behavior made Xiao Qin suspicious of the saint's secret realm. Moreover, since they discovered the saint's secret realm, even if the quasi-sage of the supreme deity sect didn't like it, there was no need to let outsiders take advantage of it. Moreover, According to Ku Suo and Jia Lingya, the people they'd selected to enter the saint's secret realm this time were not limited to the god race, but other races as well. This made it even more unreasonable. Xiao Chun didn't believe that the supreme deity sect and the god race would be so generous as to share an unexplored saint's secret realm with other races. There must be a reason for this abnormality. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others had always maintained a suspicious attitude towards this saint's secret realm. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Kusuo also knew that Xiao Chun was already suspicious of this saint's secret realm. Kusuo smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "It seems that nothing can be hidden from senior brother Xiao Chun." Kusuo's words also confirmed Xiao Chun's suspicions. There was indeed something wrong with the rumor about the saint's secret realm. It was Kusuo or the supreme deity sect's intention. As for the purpose, Xiao Chun hadn't guessed it yet. Looking at Kusuo with a burning gaze, Xiao Chun said unhurriedly, "If you want to cooperate, you have to be sincere, don't you think so?" Senior brother Kusuo. Xiao Chun's meaning was very clear. Everyone was smart, and Kusuo also knew what to do. Therefore, Kusuo activated the talisman in the flower pavilion and isolated the entire flower pavilion. After ensuring that no one could hear their conversation, Kusuo said slowly, "In fact, we had no choice. Lingya and I did find a secret realm, but it wasn't the saint's secret realm, but the secret realm of a former sage sect." Sage sect secret realm? Hearing this, Xiao Chun was taken aback. The saint's secret realm and the sage sect's secret realm only differed by one word, but there was indeed a world of difference between them. To put it bluntly, a saint's secret realm was a saint's goal or place for cultivation, while a holy sect's secret realm was where a holy sect's mountain gate was located. The difference in value was too great. After all, a holy sect usually had more than one saint in charge. According to Ku Suo, this sage sect's secret realm was called Tianyin sect. When the secret realm was first discovered, Kusuo and Jialingya had already explored it. Unfortunately, this secret realm was full of dangers, and many places, to put it bluntly, had to be filled with human lives. Even Kusuo and Jialingya couldn't break through it. The two of them couldn't break through the mechanisms of the Tianyin sect's secret realm. Later, Kusuo found some records of the Tianyin sect through some ancient books. The Tianyin sect was the strength of a human clan. Almost everyone in the sect was a talisman formation master. Therefore, there were countless talisman formations in the Tianyin sect, and they were extremely difficult to crack. This was a very ancient sect. As for why it was destroyed, no one knew. After knowing some basic information about the Tianyin sect, Kusuo and Jia Lingya told the Supreme Sect's upper echelons. After the Supreme Sect Saints and the three Quasi-Saints discussed it, the Heavenly Saint Sect came to a conclusion. If they wanted to break through the Tianyin Sect's secret realm, they either had the help of a powerful talisman formation master, or they had to fill it with human lives. After all, many talisman formations were one-time use. After triggering once, they would lose their effect. Filling it with human lives was equivalent to attracting lightning. Once the lightning was attracted, there would naturally be no more danger. Two methods were determined, but the first one was quickly rejected. The reason was very simple. The talisman formation Dao had declined, and it was impossible to find a talisman formation master who could crack the numerous talisman formations of the Tianyin sect. Moreover, there was a restriction in the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. This restriction was formed by the combination of several hundred talisman arrays, and only those below the age of 200 could enter. As a result, it was even harder to find any powerful talisman array masters among the cultivators of the various clans at this age. Since the first method didn't work, they could only use the second method, which was to use human lives to fill the talisman formations. However, using this method would naturally result in a great loss, and it was impossible to let the Supreme Sect's disciples take the risk. Therefore, Kusuo and Jia Lingya deliberately spread the news to lure the people of the Supreme Sect. At that time, these people would be cannon fodder, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 10:16. After listening to Ku Sua's explanation, Xiao Chun understood the inside story. However, although Kusua's words sounded reasonable and seemed extremely sincere, Xiao Chun still had a huge doubt in his heart. Why did Kusua take the initiative to invite him? One must know that there were definitely many good things in the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. Did Kusua not think of taking them all for himself? Since he already had a plan, there was no need for Kusua to take the initiative to invite them. After all, their existence was a great competition for Kusua. After all, their strength was not inferior to Kusua's at all. Moreover, it was even more unreasonable to say that Kusua invited them because he wasn't strong enough. The Supreme Deity sect didn't only have Kusua and Jiaolinya. If they weren't strong enough, they could have invited the other Supreme Deity sect's holy sons. There was no need to invite them. This was the doubt in Xiao Chen's heart. However, Xiao Chun could not think of a good explanation for this for the time being. Although there were still doubts in his heart, Xiao Chun did not ask. After all, even if he asked, Kusua would not tell him. This was something that everyone knew. It was obvious that there were some inside stories about the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. However, the question that Xiao Chun was considering now was whether to go or not. If he went, there would definitely be danger. However, Xiao Chun was unwilling to not go. After all, this was the ruins of a sacred sect. Moreover, it was a sect of talisman array masters that had been left behind since ancient times. There must be many good things inside. There might even be an ancient talisman array master's cultivation technique. If that was the case, it would be a huge gain. One must know that although there were talisman masters now, and talisman masters were generally proficient in talisman arrays, their attainments in talisman arrays were far too lacking compared to true talisman array masters. Moreover, in this era, it could be said that the talisman formation masters were almost extinct, and only the talisman masters remained. Once Xiao Chun was able to obtain the inheritance or cultivation method of the ancient talisman formation masters, it would definitely be of great help to the Sacred Palace if he handed it over to them, even though he was not interested in talisman formations. In Xiao Chen's memories, Patriarch Mungjia seemed to be a talisman master. There were also talisman masters among the Sacred Palace's sacred venerates and chosens. Amongst the 10 great holy sons and holy daughters, the holy daughter Quanlan, who was ranked at the 7th position, was a talisman master, and if she was allowed to obtain the inheritance or cultivation technique of a talisman formation master, then Quanlan's strength would definitely rise explosively. Never underestimate the might of a talisman formation master. Even though talisman formation masters were extremely weak in close combat, so long as they were given time and allowed to inscribe talisman formations, then they would be existences capable of destroying the heavens and the earth. Especially in a large-scale war, the effect that a talisman formation master could play would absolutely far exceed a martial artist of the same cultivation. Moreover, these were not the only treasures in the Sky Expanse sect. There were definitely other treasures. All of this made it impossible for Xiao Chun to give up this opportunity. Even though he had already guessed that this trip would not be peaceful and might even be a plot by Kusua and the others, Xiao Chun did not want to give up. As if he had guessed Xiao Chen's thoughts, Chunling nodded slightly. Seeing this, Xiao Chun naturally understood Chunling's intentions. Clearly, he also wanted to take a look at the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. With Chunling's support, Xiao Chun quickly made up his mind. He looked at Kusua and smiled. "All right, let's go together." Kusua smiled when he saw Xiao Chun nod in agreement. A strange look flashed across Jiaolingya's eyes, but she did not say anything. The four agreed that they would set off from the Cloud Prefecture City in 5 days and head to the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory together. During this period, Kusua would also spread the location of the Sky Expanse sect's sacred ground through the channels of the Supreme God sect. When the time came, many people would probably head there. Xiao Chun naturally did not need to care about these matters. Kusua and Jialingya would handle everything. After all, the Supreme God Continent was the territory of the Supreme God sect, and the power of the Supreme God sect was naturally not something that the Sacred Palace could compare to. The Cloud Prefecture Youth Gathering lasted for 3 days. During these 3 days, many young geniuses of the Cloud Prefecture made their moves, wanting to show their faces before Xiao, Chun, Kusuo, and the other Chosens and Saintesses. Of course, they did not know that their performance was unable to impress Xiao, Chun, Kusuo, and the other Chosens and Saintesses. Kusuo was bored to death as he persevered until the end of the youthful gathering. When the youthful gathering ended, Kusuo arrived at the battle stage and looked at the crowd with a smile on his face. "I am deeply shocked by everyone's performance. Previously, I said that I would choose some of you to train in the Saint's secret territory with us, but now I have changed my mind. The Saint's secret territory is an opportunity for everyone, so I would like to share this opportunity with everyone. Next, I will tell you the location of the Saint's secret territory. When the time comes, anyone who wants to go can go and seek their own opportunities," Kusuo said slowly. Hearing his words, everyone present couldn't help but become excited. They all thought that they would have the opportunity to train in the Saint's secret territory and soar to the sky in one fell swoop. However, they did not know that there would be no opportunities for them at all. There would only be cannon fodder. A glint flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes when he saw the excitement on the faces of the crowd. He already knew that the Sky Expanse sect needed a lot of cannon fodder this time. Looking at the expressions of the people present, he knew that they would definitely not let go of this opportunity. Therefore, Xiao Chan wondered if he should tell the human race cultivators not to go. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to obtain any opportunities, they might even lose their lives. They were all from the human race. Xiao Chan did not want to watch these human race cultivators die in vain. Thinking of this, Xiao Chan quickly made up his mind. He would secretly inform them not to participate in the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory this time. The decision was made. Of course, Xiao Chan did not know that Kusuo and Jialingya had made the same decision. The two had already planned to secretly inform the warriors of the Shun clan not to go. In the big environment of the North Star boundary, the same race was definitely the strongest bond. When there were other races present, the same race would unite. This was the consensus of all the races in the North Star boundary. Because in the 100 races, if the same race could not unite, then they would not be far from extinction. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the same race could be trusted in the North Star boundary. Of course, this was under the premise that there were other races present. If there were no other races, then it would not be strange for the same race to fight among themselves. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 10:17. The Yinzhou Yueying gathering had come to a successful end. However, for everyone present, their hearts had already flown to the Saint's secret territory. It was as if they could see the Saint's inheritance beckoning to them. However, after the Yueying gathering ended, Xiao Chun and Jialingya transmitted their voices to the human race and divine race, martialists respectively. They told them not to interfere in this matter, otherwise they would die a horrible death. They did not want the human race and divine race to be cannon fodder. In response to Xiao Chun and Jialingya's transmission, the young talents of the human race and divine race who participated in the Yueying gathering nodded silently. The young talents of the human race and divine race were reminded, but the pitiful people of the other races knew nothing about it. They were still dreaming of soaring to the top. Of course, Xiao Chun and the others, as well as Jialingya and the others, did not have the slightest sympathy for the other races. This was because the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory really needed cannon fodder, and the people of the other races were obviously the best choice. The major races of the North Star realm had been plotting against each other from the beginning to the end. This was very normal. This was also the rule of the world. Those who were not of the same race would have different intentions. In the competition between the races, some races would become stronger, and some races would naturally disappear in the long river of time. After the Yueying gathering ended, Xiao Chun accompanied Qin Shru and the other two ladies to stay in the Jade Flower Forest for another day. In the end, The three ladies reluctantly left because of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. However, Kusuo also promised Xiao Chun that if he wanted to, he could come to the Jade Flower Forest at any time in the future. The Yunzhou branch of the Supreme Deity sect would not make things difficult for Xiao Chun and the others. With Kusuo's promise, Qin Shiru and the other two girls were naturally very happy. Then, the group returned to Cloud State City. This time, Xiao Chun and the others directly moved into the city governor's mansion in Cloud State City, which was also the Cloud State branch of Supreme Deity sect. After personally arranging accommodations for Xiao Chun and the others, Kusuo and Jialingya went to the Sky Expanse sect 2 days later to prepare for their journey to the Sky Expanse sect. As for the location of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory, the two of them quickly spread the news through the channels of the Supreme Deity sect. Of course, to the public, the Supreme Deity sect only said that they had discovered a saint's secret territory. The news about the saint's secret realm spread like wildfire in the Cloud Prefecture. In less than half a day, not only the Cloud Prefecture, but the warriors in the neighboring prefectures also received the news. Countless young martial artists began to rush towards the entrance of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. The Supreme Divine Sect had already announced that the entrance to the secret territory would open in 10 days. As the news spread like wildfire, the instigators of all this, Kusuo and Jialingya, were currently in the city governor's mansion in Cloud State City. In the room, the two sat opposite each other. Kusuo chuckled as he looked at the silent Jialingya. "What's the matter? What's done is done. What's there to worry about?" "No, I just feel that Xiao Chun agreed too readily. Could it be a trap? After all, humans are notoriously cunning." Hearing Kusuo's words, Jialingya shook her head. "Don't worry. It's fine even if it's a trap. We're already in the same boat now. Moreover, the Patriarch has also sent news that he will personally invite the two patriarchs of the Sacred Palace to the Supreme Deity sect in a few days. When the time comes, the matter will naturally be settled." "There's nothing to worry about," said Kusuo. Hearing Kusuo's words, Jialingya nodded slightly and did not say anything more. Just as Xiao Chun had thought, there was indeed an inside story behind the Tianyin sect's secret territory. Moreover, it could be said that the Supreme Deity sect had deliberately planned all of this. It was true that the Tianyin sect's secret territory had been discovered, and Kusuo's explanation to the Tianyin sect was also true. The Tianyin sect's secret territory truly existed and had never been explored. However, there was more than one entrance to the Tianyin sect's secret territory. Instead, there were 3 entrances. One of them was in the Supreme Deity continent, while the other 2 were in the High Continent and the Wastelands continent. Among them, the High Continent was the continent where the Ghost Race's Quasi-Saint sect, the Night Ghost Pavilion, was located, while the Wastelands continent was the continent where the Barbarian Race's Quasi-Saint sect, the Liwang sect, was located. In other words, the Tianyin sect's secret territory did not belong to the Supreme Deity sect alone, but was jointly discovered by the 3 great Quasi-Saint sections. When the entrance opened, the people from the 3 great secondary sage sects would meet inside. Clearly, it would be a fierce battle between dragons and tigers. Moreover, what made the Supreme Deity sect even more depressed was that according to the news, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect had already joined forces in order to kick the Supreme Deity sect out of the secret territory and split the benefits of the Tianyin sect equally between the 2 sections. Of course, it would be even better if they could kill the chosen and saintess of the Supreme Deity sect in the Tianyin sect's secret territory. Faced with such a situation, the Supreme Deity sect did not have many choices. They could either give up or fight with all their might. Giving up was easy and wouldn't cause any losses, but the Supreme Deity sect couldn't do that. It was a huge discovery, and it was not easy for anyone to give up on it. In fact, while the Supreme Deity sect was in a dilemma, the Sacred Palace appeared in the Yunfeng Prefecture. Moreover, the Supreme Deity sect quickly learned that the Sacred Palace's team was very strong this time. There were 3 chosen and saintess, as well as 2 quasi-saints and supreme venerables. With such a strong force, the Supreme Deity sect quickly came up with a plan, which was to join forces with the Sacred Palace to fight against the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect. It was for this reason that the Supreme Deity sect had begun to scheme. It could be said that the Supreme Deity sect had been secretly manipulating the Yunzhou Youth Gathering from the very beginning. Everything was done to pull the Sacred Palace onto the Supreme Deity sect's worship. As for why the Supreme Deity sect did not directly inform the Sacred Palace about the alliance, it was because they were not confident that the Sacred Palace would agree, so they had no choice but to do so. This way, when the Sacred Palace found out the truth, there would be no way out. At that time, Xiao Chun and the others would enter the secret territory of the Tianyin sect, and it would be impossible for the two quasi-saint supreme venerables, Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie, not to join forces with the Supreme Deity sect. It was indeed a good plan. Moreover, based on the current situation, things were indeed developing according to the Supreme Deity sect's plan. As long as Xiao Chun and the others entered the secret territory of the Tianyin sect, the quasi-saint supreme venerables of the Supreme Deity sect would come forward to invite Xiao Sheng and Meng Jie. At that time, the Supreme Deity sect would join forces with the Sacred Palace to fight against the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect. Moreover, Ku Suo and Jialing would not be the only chosen from the Supreme Deity sect to enter the secret territory of the Tianyin sect. There would be another chosen from the Supreme Deity sect and the Sacred Palace entering the secret territory of the Tianyin sect. As for how many chosen from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect would enter, it was unknown for the time being, but the difference in numbers should not be too great. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 10:18. Regardless of whether it was the Sacred Palace, the Supreme Divine Sect, the Night Ghost Pavilion, or the Li Wang sect, it was impossible for them to send all their chosens and saintesses into the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. Therefore, the Sacred Palace and Supreme Divine Sect each sent 3 chosens and saintesses. Presumably, the same was true for the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect. After all, although the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory was very tempting, it wasn't worth it for the 4 great quasi-saint sects to stake everything on it. To put it bluntly, the discovery of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory was also a game between the 4 great sections. Inside the secret territory, everyone was competing for the various inheritance treasures left behind by the Sky Expanse sect. In the outside world, the 4 great sects were also restricting each other in order to obtain more benefits. This was a very normal game between the secondary sage sections. However, the competition this time would be very intense because the benefits involved were very big. It was so big that even the secondary sage sects couldn't underestimate it. Of course, the Sacred Palace had been forcefully dragged into this. Unknowingly, they had been tied to the Supreme Divine Sect and were now opposing the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect. However, the game between the 4 great quasi-saint sects wasn't without any benefits for the Sacred Palace. Although the outcome was unknown, there was one thing that was certain. Through this game, through the real contact with the other quasi-saint sects in the North Star boundary, the Sacred Palace would be able to gain a foothold in the North Star boundary faster. This was also what the Sacred Palace needed the most right now. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the news of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory had been completely spread by the Supreme Divine Sect. At this time, many young cultivators from various races were rushing towards the entrance of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. However, among these young cultivators, it was obvious that the number of divine race and human race cultivators was very small. It couldn't be said that there were none, but it was pitifully small. Compared to the number of young cultivators from other races, the divine race and human race cultivators were simply as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Obviously, this result was caused by the secret manipulation of Xiao Chun and Ku Suo. They constantly warned the young cultivators from the divine race and human race not to participate in this matter. As a result, almost all of the young cultivators from the human race and divine race obeyed. Only a very small number of people didn't take it seriously. More than 100,000 young cultivators from various races rushed towards the entrance of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. At the same time, in the Supreme Divine Sect's Yun Province branch, Kusuo, Jialingya, and another chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect found Shao Chun and the others. Of the Supreme Divine Sect's sex branch, the new Supreme Divine Sect Holy Son arrived at Cloud State last night. His name was Sharjah, and he was the second Holy Son of the Supreme Divine Sect. He was even stronger than Kusuo and Jialingya. Shao Chun was even more certain that the matter wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface after personally ending everyone's business. However, since he had already made his decision, Shao Chun naturally wouldn't shrink back. Shao Chun had encountered many dangers along the way, and if Shao Chun chose to shrink back every time he encountered danger, he wouldn't be able to become the first chosen of the Sacred Palace. Shao Chun firmly believed that opportunities often coexisted with danger. As such, he had no intention of backing down. Shao Chun looked at Sharjah and said with a smile, "Your Supreme Divine Sect has even sent out the second chosen. It seems that the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory this time is really not simple." Although Shao Chun seemed to have said it casually, Sharjah and the other two knew that Shao Chun had been suspicious for a long time. Sharjah and the others didn't find it strange that Shao Chun was suspicious. After all, anyone who could become a chosen naturally couldn't be a brainless person. This whole matter was full of strangeness, so it would be strange if Shao Chun didn't suspect anything. However, Sharjah and the others didn't say anything about it. Sharjah chuckled softly. "Brother Shao Chun is really humorous. It's almost time we should set off." Sharjah didn't linger on this topic and changed the topic. Shao Chun and the others didn't say anything else, and the group directly set off for the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. From the Cloud Prefecture city, they naturally used transportation arrays along the way. Soon, the group left the Cloud Prefecture and headed north. It could be said that they had already arrived at the northernmost part of the Sky Saint sect. This place belonged to the northern prefecture of the Supreme Divine Prefecture and was extremely far from the Cloud Prefecture. Therefore, even though they used transportation arrays and didn't make any stops along the way, it still took them 2 days to reach the northern prefecture city. There was only 1 day left before the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory opened. However, the northern prefecture city wasn't far from the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory's entrance. With the group's speed, they would arrive within 2 hours. In the Cloud Prefecture city, there were already disciples of the Supreme Divine Sect waiting. There weren't many of them, only 5 people, but all 5 of them were the prospective chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect. Sharjah and the other 2 chosen, in addition to the 5 prospective chosen, were all the members of the Supreme Divine Sect entering the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. There were only 8 people, but all of them were the most elite disciples of the Supreme Divine Sect. The 5 prospective chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect bowed, respectfully, to Shao Chun and the other 2. Although they couldn't help but glance at Qin Shu and the other 2 girls, they didn't do anything out of the ordinary. After resting for a night in the Cloud Prefecture city, the group set off again early the next morning. 2 hours later, they finally arrived at the entrance of the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory, a huge valley. The valley, which was originally deserted, was now packed with people. More than 100,000 young cultivators from various races had gathered here, all waiting for the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory to open. When they saw Shao Chun, Sharjah, and the other chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect and Sacred Palace, the crowd quickly quieted down and silently waited for the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory to open. Kusuo said after standing in the air and looking at the people below. Then, he said, "Everyone, the Saint's secret territory is about to open. Please make your preparations." Until now, the young cultivators below still thought that it was just a Saint's secret territory. Following Kusuo's words, everyone secretly made their preparations and rushed in as soon as the entrance opened. Kusuo didn't waste any time and took out a talisman from his storage ring. This talisman was the key to opening the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. The talisman immediately shot out and emitted a dazzling white light in the sky. Soon, under the illumination of the white light, the space was torn apart and a passage to the secret territory of the Tian Yin sect was successfully opened. As the passage was opened, someone shouted, "Hurry up! The secret territory has opened." In an instant, more than 100,000 people in the valley swarmed into the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1019. When the entrance to the secret realm of the Sky Expanse sect opened, the hundreds of thousands of young warriors from various clans in the valley rushed into the secret realm like a swarm of bees. Xiao Chun, Sharjah, and the others, who were standing in the air, did not stop them and allowed them to enter. In truth, they couldn't be blamed for this. After all, no one could remain calm in front of a saint's secret territory that had never been discovered before. Everyone wanted to enter as soon as possible and find their own opportunities. The first to enter would have more opportunities. Because of this, everyone was scrambling to enter the secret territory. The valley was instantly thrown into chaos, but from beginning to end, Xiao Chun and the others did not stop them, nor did they have any intention of rushing to enter. What a joke! These people were here to act as cannon fodder. Letting them enter first was the supreme God sect's plan. Since Xiao Chun and the others already knew of this plan, they naturally wouldn't be foolish enough to enter first. They silently watched the young cultivators from various clans below. At the same time, similar scenes are taking place on the Heiyi continent and the Wastelands continent. The other two entrances to the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory were also opened. Just like on the Supreme God continent, the Chosens and Saintesses of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect hovered in the air, completely ignoring the chaos below and allowing them to rush into the secret territory. The Night Ghost Pavilion had sent out a total of 2 Chosens, while the Li Wang sect had sent out 3 Chosens. The number of Chosens from the 2 quasi-saint sects combined was actually 1 less than the Sacred Palace and Supreme God sect. This was obviously good news for Xiao Chun and the others. Of course, this was probably because the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang sect had not expected the Sacred Palace to participate. After all, the 2 sects had joined forces and sent out a total of 5 Chosens. This was already a sure win. Of course, this was only for the Supreme God sect. After all, the Supreme God sect only had 7 Chosens in total. They couldn't possibly send 5 Chosens into the secret territory at once. Therefore, the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang sect believed that 5 Chosens was enough to suppress the Supreme God sect. Unfortunately, the Supreme God sect had already pulled the Sacred Palace onto their worship. As a result, the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang sect no longer had the slightest advantage. On the contrary, they were at a disadvantage in terms of the number of Chosens. Compared to the ghost races thin and pale, the barbarian race was extremely muscular. They were even more muscular than the beast race in human form. Among all the races, the barbarian race was undoubtedly the strongest in terms of physical strength. Even the beast race, which was ranked second, could not compare to them. This was the strength of the barbarian race. Of course, there was also a side of what if. The barbarian race usually only focused on the cultivation of their physical body. Therefore, their ability to refine the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was clearly inferior to other races. However, the barbarian race was also very smart. They knew their own what if, so they avoided their weaknesses and developed their strengths. They cultivated their physical strength to the extreme. The 3 entrances opened at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of pavilion masters and cultivators who did not know the truth rushed into the secret territory. Everyone's eyes flashed with excitement. However, they did not know that they would not obtain any treasures or inheritances. Instead, they would become cannon fodder. On the Supreme God continent, more than 2 hours later, More than 100,000 young cultivators from various races had all entered the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect. Sharjah smiled. Let's go. It's time for us to move. Sharjah led the group of people from the Supreme God sect and flew into the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect. Seeing this, Xiao Chun and the others followed closely. On the way, Xiao Chun sent a message to Chunling, Qin Shiru, and the others. Be careful. There are probably many talisman arrays in the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect. It will be very dangerous to enter. Also, don't be careless against the people from the Supreme God sect. They had to be careful. Not only did they have to be careful of the talisman arrays in the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect, but they also had to be careful of the people from the Supreme God sect. Everyone followed the cultivators from various races into the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect. At the same time, the cultivators from various races who had entered earlier had already passed through the passage and entered the secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect. It was a brand new world with blue skies and white clouds. The air was fresh and the spiritual energy was extremely dense. Looking at the world that seemed like it existed in a painting, the young cultivators from various races could not help but exclaim excitedly, "What a beautiful place! There must be an inheritance in this place. Ha! The saint's inheritance belongs to me." As they spoke, many people spread out and began to explore the depths of the secret territory. However, when they were less than 1,000 meters away from the entrance, numerous talisman arrays were activated. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of people were trapped in the talisman arrays. Standing at the entrance, one could see that the secret talisman arrays were activated all around. There were close to 1,000 of them. Rays of light of various colors shot up into the sky. There were offensive talisman arrays, trapping arrays, illusory arrays, and all kinds of other talisman arrays. Following the appearance of these talisman arrays, miserable cries could be heard. The cultivators from various races who had entered earlier because they wanted to obtain the inheritance were trapped in different talisman arrays. They were attacked by the power of the talisman arrays and constantly let out miserable cries. The originally heaven-like secret territory of the Heaven Expanse sect had now become a hellish existence. The power of the talisman arrays were different, but with so many of them activated at the same time, the scene was extremely horrifying. The originally excited mood was instantly extinguished. They had only just entered the secret territory, and they had already encountered such a situation. Those who were lucky enough not to be trapped by the talisman arrays involuntarily retreated. Damn it! Why are there so many talisman arrays? Could this have been set up by the saint when he was alive? There are so many talisman arrays. Does this mean that the owner of this saint's secret territory was a saint-level symbol master when he was alive? Then what should we do? How can we break through a talisman array set up by a saint-level symbol master? Everyone began to discuss in succession. Many people began to guess that the previous owner of this secret realm was very likely a saint-level symbol master. Therefore, he had set up so many symbol arrays in this secret realm in order to protect this secret realm. Everyone guessed one after another. However, they clearly hadn't imagined that the talisman formation here wasn't set up by a mere saint-grade talisman master, and it was left behind by the entire Sky Expanse sect. It was a talisman formation left behind by a saint-grade sect that specialized in talisman formation masters. These talisman arrays were much more terrifying than those left behind by a single saint-level symbol master. Originally, they were filled with joy and wanted to seize the inheritance that belonged to them. Little did they know that the entrance to the saint stage in everyone's eyes had now become the gate to hell. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:20. Blood-curdling screams rang out one after another. Everyone's excitement had been completely extinguished by the blood-curdling screams. Those who weren't trapped by the talisman arrays kept retreating, their faces pale as they whispered to each other. The thousands of talisman arrays activated by the cultivators of various races were only the first line of defense in the Sky Expanse sect's mystic realm. Of course, it was also the most numerous. After passing through the first line of defense, there would be more talisman arrays in the depths of the mystic realm. According to the Supreme Deity Sect's speculation, the entire Sky Expanse Sect's mystic realm was enveloped by layers of defensive talisman arrays from the outside to the inside, all the way to the entrance of the Sky Expanse Sect. Only by breaking through these layers of defensive talisman arrays would one have the opportunity to enter the Sky Expanse Sect and obtain the inheritance and treasures left behind by the Sky Expanse Sect. Just as everyone was scared out of their wits, Shao Chun, Sharjah, and the others entered the Sky Expanse Sect's sacred ground through the passageway. As everyone entered, the entrance to the Sky Expanse Sect's sacred ground was closed. The talisman that Kusuo had used to open the entrance had also disappeared. Obviously, the talisman key to open the entrance was a one-time use item. After the entrance disappeared, everyone had no way to leave the Sky Expanse Sect's mystic realm. The cultivators of various races, who were already terrified, were at a loss as to what to do. All of them looked at Shao Chun, Kusuo, and the other saints and saintesses of the two great quasi-sage sections. Under everyone's gaze, Shao Chun glanced at the cultivators of various races who were trapped by the talisman arrays not far away. Although there were still some people who were persevering, most of them had already been killed by the talisman arrays. In almost an instant, tens of thousands of lives have been taken away by the thousands of talisman arrays. It would be a lie if Shao Chun said that he didn't feel sad about the cultivators of various races who had been killed by the first wave of talisman arrays. After all, those were all lives. However, it was impossible for Shao Chun to save them. Shao Chun simply couldn't save them. Shao Chun himself wasn't a savior. In Shao Chun's heart, it was enough as long as he could protect the people around him. Although it was selfish, it was very realistic. Shao Chun was not like those who always talked about benevolence, righteousness, and morality. All this time, Shao Chun only wanted to make a better life for himself and the people around him. As for others, he could help if he had the ability, but if he did not have the ability, Shao Chun would not force himself to do so. After all, Shao Chun did not have the ability to save the world right now. Incessant screams resounded in everyone's ears. Under the gazes of countless pairs of eyes, Kusuo stood up and spoke in a clear voice to the martial artists of various races who were not trapped by the array but had been scared out of their wits. Everyone, the Saint Realm's mystic realm is inherently dangerous. Naturally, you'll have to go through a test after entering it. I'd like to remind everyone that you still need to be careful here. Of course, whether or not you can obtain the Saint's inheritance will depend on your own ability and luck. Without further ado, we'll take our leave first. With that, Kusuo, Sharjah, and the other Supreme Divine Sect saints and prospective saints took their leave first. Seeing this, Shao Chun and the others followed closely behind. Seeing the saints of the two great quasi-sage sects take the lead and walk into the depths of the mystic realm, everyone quickly regained their senses and kept recalling Kusuo's words. That's right. How can the saint's inheritance be obtained so easily? It's normal for there to be a test. This time, I must obtain the saint's inheritance, a Ghost Clan cultivator said fiercely and immediately walked into the depths of the mystic realm. With the first person taking action, a second and third person quickly followed suit. Gradually, everyone walked into the depths of the mystic realm. However, compared to the beginning, everyone's actions were clearly much more cautious. If one wanted to obtain the saint's inheritance, they naturally had to go through hardships and dangers. It was understandable that there would be danger. If they didn't even dare to face this little bit of danger, there was no need to talk about the saint's inheritance. In addition, the saints of the two great quasi-sage sects had already entered the depths of the mystic realm. As such, under the lead of Kusuo, Shao Chun, and the other saints, everyone gathered their courage and headed into the depths of the mystic realm. However, no one knew that Shao Chun and the others actually didn't enter the mystic realm at all. Instead, under Kusuo's lead, they came to a mountain peak and quietly watched everyone continue to enter the mystic realm. Currently, the role of the cannon fodder had yet to be played. Only a portion of the many talisman arrays had been activated. At this time, Xiao Chun, Ku Suo, and the others naturally couldn't rashly enter the mystic realm. Their departure was only to give everyone the courage to continue moving forward. Xiao Chun sighed softly as he looked at the cultivators from various clans who were rushing forward again. At the same time, Sharja came to Xiao Chen's side and looked at Xiao Chen. Brother Xiao Chun, there are some things that I think we can talk about openly and honestly. Sharja took the initiative to say this. Hearing this, Xiao Chen looked deeply at him and said calmly, "Then let's talk. It just so happens that I also have many doubts that I would like your Supreme Deity sect to explain." With that, Xiao Chen called Chunling, Long Qing, and Qin Shiru to sit together. They sat facing each other and looked at Sharja, Kusuo, and Jiaolingya. At this time, Sharja spoke unhurriedly. Brother Xiao Chun, actually, there are some inside stories about this whole matter. This Sky Expanse sect's mystic realm doesn't only have one entrance. There are a total of 3 entrances. One of them is in the Taishan continent, which is the entrance that we just passed through. As for the other 2 entrances, one is in the Heiyi continent, and the other is in the Wasteland continent. He slowly explained the whole matter to Xiao Chun and the others. This time, Sharja didn't hide anything and truthfully told Xiao Chun and the others everything. From the beginning of the Supreme Deity sect's plan to now, that everyone was completely tied to the same boat, Sharja told Xiao Chun and the others everything bluntly. At this point, everyone had already entered the Sky Expanse sect's mystic realm, and the entrance was already closed. There was no way out, so naturally, there was no need to hide anything. Moreover, for the sake of future cooperation, Sharja had to tell Xiao Chun and the others the truth. After all, they still had to deal with the Night, Ghost Pavilion, and Li Wang's sect's holy sons and holy daughters together. Xiao Chun briefly recounted the matter. After hearing Sharja's words, Long Qing, who was sitting beside Xiao Chun, immediately roared furiously. "So, your Supreme Deity sect has tricked us? Good, very good. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." Clearly, Long Qing was very angry at being used by the Supreme Deity sect. She was about to attack, but at this time, Xiao Chun, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Second sister, wait a moment. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 10:21. Long Qing flew into a rage when she heard Sharja's words, but was stopped by Xiao Chun. Long Qing said somewhat unwillingly after hearing Xiao Chen's words, "Little brother, we've been tricked by them. Are you going to let it go just like that?" Long Qing was clearly still angry. In response, Xiao Chun gently sighed and said, "Second sister, don't get too worked up. Sit down and talk." Long Qing had a very bad temper. As a member of the Dragon Clan, she was born with the arrogance of the Dragon Clan and did not place anyone in her eyes. However, when Long Qing was angry, Xiao Chun could stop her. In other words, Long Qing only listened to Xiao Chun. Even Shenling's words did not carry much weight when Long Qing was angry. Long Qing sullenly sat down with a pout. Afterwards, she did not say a word, while Xiao Chun looked coldly at Sharja and the other 2. Should I say that the Supreme Divine Sect has good methods, or should I say that we're too stupid? Sharja did not seem to care about Long Qing's angry shout and maintained his faint smile when he heard Xiao Chen's words. "Brother Xiao Chun, I feel that this is beneficial for everyone, whether it's the Sacred Palace or the Supreme Divine Sect." Kusuo did not lie about the Heaven Expanse sect's secret domain. The only ones who did not tell you were the Night, Ghost Pavilion, and Li Wang sect. Now that we've joined forces, we'll naturally be able to contend against them. When the time comes, we'll be able to fulfill our previous agreement. The Supreme Divine Sect scheme did not cause Xiao Chen's group or the entire Sacred Palace to suffer any losses. Because of this, Sharja was certain that Xiao Chun would agree because Xiao Chun and the others had no other way out. Only then would they have a chance to compete with the Night, Ghost Pavilion, and the Li Wang sect. Otherwise, they would be defeated one by one. At that time, not only would they not be able to obtain the inheritance and treasures of the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm, but their lives would also be in danger. Both sides would benefit if they cooperated, and both sides would lose if they separated. This was the current situation. Xiaochen smiled brightly when he heard Sharja's words. In that case, I'm afraid your supreme divine sect's ancestor has already met with our sacred palace's ancestor. Sharja had guessed that the patriarch of the supreme divine sect would meet with Xiao Sheng and Mengjie. He nodded and said, "Of course. It's not up to us to decide if we want to form an alliance. The patriarchs of both sides will have to meet." "It seems that I have no choice now," Xiaochen said. "It's a win-win situation. Does brother Xiao Chun have any reason to refuse?" Sharja asked. Now that they had said so much, all that was left was to wait for Xiao Chen's answer. Xiao Chun hesitated for a moment before he took the initiative to extend his hand. "Then I wish our cooperation a success. Of course. We won't do something so stupid as to dig our own graves." Sharja also reached out to shake Xiao Chen's hand and said with a smile. Thus, the two sides reached an agreement. No matter what the reason was, Xiao Chen's group and Sharja's group were already on the same side from now on, at least in the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. Xiao Chen also knew that a fierce battle would definitely break out in the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. As for the location, it would most likely be within the Sky Expanse sect. When the time came, the Chosens and Chosens of the four great quasi-saint sects would gather and fight over the Sky Expanse sect's inheritance and treasures. In the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm, Xiao Chun and the others learned the whole story. In the outside world, in the Supreme God sect's headquarters, Xiao Sheng and Mengjie were currently sitting in a beautiful garden with Yidun. The garden was located in an independent small world, and the scenery was extremely beautiful. Just like Xiao Chun, Xiao Sheng and Mengjie had indeed met with the Supreme God sect's ancestor. The person they met was Ancestor Yidun, who had previously visited the sacred palace. Just like Sharja, Yidun also told Xiao Sheng and Mengjie the truth of the matter. He also specifically explained that Xiao Chun and the others had already entered the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. As such, Xiao Sheng had no way out unless he gave up on Xiao Chun and the others. No anger could be seen on Xiao Sheng's face. After hearing Yidun's words, Xiao Sheng's face remained calm. He took a sip of the tea in front of him and said indifferently, "In that case, what does the sacred palace need to do?" Xiao Sheng didn't refuse because he no longer had the right to refuse. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, a smile appeared on Yidun's face. "It's very simple. Xiao Chun, Sharja, and the others will fight for the inheritance and treasures in the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm, while we will be responsible for guarding them outside, especially when they leave the secret realm." Since Xiao Sheng had agreed to cooperate, Yidun didn't need to hold anything back. He truthfully revealed the biggest secret of the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. They already knew that there were a total of 3 entrances to the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. However, these entrances could only be entered, not exited. Once the entrances were sealed, they couldn't be opened again. The only way to leave was through the only exit, and this exit was connected to a barren continent. In other words, no matter which side won in the end and obtained the Sky Expanse sect's treasures, they wouldn't be able to return to their respective continents. Instead, they would be sent to the barren continent. As such, whether it was the Night Ghost Pavilion, the Li Wang sect, the Supreme God sect, or the Sacred Palace, they would all send experts to the barren continent to await everyone's return. At that time, if they won and obtained the Sky Expanse sect's inheritance and treasures, they would escort them back. If they lost, they would directly snatch the treasures. Xiao Chun, Sharja, and the others would be in charge of the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. As for Xiao Sheng, Mengjie, Yidun, and the other quasi-saint great sovereigns, their task was to head to the barren continent and deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang sect experts. Both inside and outside the secret realm, the 4 quasi-saint sects were competing with each other. Especially when Xiao Chun and the others left the Celestial Expanse sect's secret realm. If the Sacred Palace and the Supreme Divine sect didn't pay attention to resisting the forces of the Power King sect and the Night Ghost Pavilion, then even if they had already obtained the treasures and inheritances, they would probably be forced to give away a portion of them. In short, the Supreme God Sect needed the Sacred Palace's help. Xiao Sheng was silent for a moment when he heard Yadun's words. He then looked at Yadun and asked seriously, "In that case, how many people will the Supreme God Sect send to guard the Sky Expanse Sect's secret realm?" Since the two sides were cooperating, the Sacred Palace would naturally send experts to guard the Sky Expanse Sect's secret realm. However, before that, Xiao Sheng wanted to know how many people the Supreme God Sect would send this time. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:22. Hearing Xiao Sheng's words, Yadun didn't hide anything and immediately told Xiao Sheng about the Supreme Divine Sex team. Honesty was a prerequisite for cooperation, and this was the same for both Yadun and Xiao Sheng. Both sides knew that there was no benefit in hiding anything. According to Yadun, he would be leading the Supreme Divine Sex team this time. At the same time, there would be 8 saints, 2 chosen, 20 half-saints, and 50 Tao emperors. As for the Tao sovereigns and Tao kings below them, there would be dozens to hundreds of people. A total of 500 people would be guarding the exit of the Tianyin sect's secret territory. A team of 500 people. Xiao Sheng was silent for a moment when he heard Yadun's words. He knew very well that if they wanted to cooperate, the Sacred Palace would naturally have to send a corresponding team to the exit of the Tianyin sect's secret territory. After weighing the pros and cons, Xiao Sheng said, "The Sacred Palace currently has a total of 1,500 people on the Taishan continent. Let's head to the exit of the Tianyin sect's secret territory together." He didn't plan to send more people from the Sacred Palace. Firstly, it was too troublesome to contact them. Secondly, it was too far away. Therefore, Xiao Sheng planned to lead the 1,500 disciples on the Taishan continent directly to the exit of the Tianyin sect's secret territory. Although the Sacred Palace didn't send any more people, the Sacred Palace team wasn't weak. There were 2 quasi-saint great sovereigns, 5 saints, and more than a dozen half-saint experts. This was enough to deal with a lot of problems. Yadun had already guessed that Xiao Sheng would do this when he heard Xiao Sheng's words, so he nodded and agreed on the spot. After confirming the cooperation, Xiao Sheng and Yadun agreed to head to the exit of the Tianyin sect's secret territory together. However, before that, Xiao Sheng still needed to gather all the Sacred Palace disciples to the Supreme Divine Sect. In the outside world, Xiao Sheng, Yadun, and the other ancestors had already reached an agreement. Inside the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm, Xiao Chun and the others were also working together with Sharjah and the other Supreme Divine Sects chosen. Now that they knew the truth, many things became much simpler. There was nothing that they couldn't tell Xiao Chun and the others. Therefore, in the next few days, Xiao Chun and the others obtained a lot of information about the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory from Sharjah and Kusua. The Supreme Deity sect had clearly researched the Sky Expanse sect. Whether it was through ancient records or other means, the Supreme Deity sect had done their best to understand the Sky Expanse sect. The Sky Expanse sect was indeed a sect that couldn't be underestimated. Although it was only a saint-grade sect, the Sky Expanse sect was known as the sect that gathered all the strongest Talisman Array masters in the entire North Star boundary during the ancient times. Almost all the famous Talisman Array masters were from the Sky Expanse sect, which was very terrifying. At the same time, due to the gathering of so many powerful Talisman Array masters, the Sky Expanse sect definitely had a lot of inheritances and treasures. It was precisely because of this that the 4 quasi-sage sects attached so much importance to the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. Although it was only a saint-grade sect, due to the uniqueness of the Sky Expanse sect, its status wasn't inferior to the quasi-sage sections. Moreover, in the era of the Sky Expanse sect, almost every quasi-sage sect treated it with respect. The reason was very simple. Any sect needed Talisman Array masters to draw powerful Talisman Arrays. In that era, the Sky Expanse sect was the representative of the peak of Talisman Array masters. After knowing the high status of the Sky Expanse sect in the history of the North Star boundary, Xiaochen also attached more importance to the Sky Expanse sect. 3 days passed in a row before the group began to go deeper into the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm. The young cultivators from various clans who had set off earlier should have activated most of the talisman arrays in the secret realm by now. Although there was no guarantee that there weren't any talisman arrays that hadn't been activated, there was no doubt that the safety of Xiaochen and the others had been greatly improved after so many talisman arrays have been activated. However, in order to enter the depths of the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm safely, the price they had to pay wasn't low. Just like the corpses that Xiaochen and the others saw along the way. These corpses were the cultivators from various clans who had entered the Sky Expanse sect's secret realm together with them 3 days ago. However, most of them have been killed by the talisman arrays now. Even if there were still some alive, there wouldn't be many of them. After some speculation, from the entrance of the secret realm to the location of the Sky Expanse sect, they had to pass through a total of 3 layers of talisman array defense. Xiaochen and the others had already passed through the first layer of talisman array defense long ago. After traveling for a day, Xiaochen and the others also safely passed through the second layer of talisman array defense. The second layer of talisman array defense has also been destroyed by them. Only the last layer of talisman array defense is left. Sharjah heaved a sigh of relief after passing through the second layer of talisman array defense. They had broken through 2 layers of talisman array defense in a row. However, the method they used was the simplest and most brutal, which was to use human lives to fill the gap. After hearing Sharjah's words, Xiaochen and the others didn't say anything. They weren't people who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind. They didn't have much sympathy for the cultivators from various clans who were used as cannon fodder. They continued to move forward. 2 days later, they arrived at the last layer of talisman array defense. Here, they could already faintly see the location of the Sky Expanse sect. Hidden in the clouds, one could vaguely see a number of exquisite and simple buildings. These buildings stretched out and were arranged in an orderly manner, forming a magnificent building complex. They finally saw the Sky Expanse sect. However, there was a huge problem in front of Xiaochen and the others now, and that was the third layer of talisman array defense. The first and second layer of talisman array defense had been forcefully broken through by the cultivators from various clans. However, although the third layer of talisman array defense had also been destroyed by the cultivators from various clans, it was obviously only a small part of it. There were still more talisman arrays that hadn't been triggered. Xiaochen and the others obviously wouldn't be able to pass through the third layer of talisman array defense as easily as before. After passing through 2 layers of talisman array defense in a row, almost all the cultivators from various clans were dead or injured. Therefore, Xiaochen and the others could only rely on their own strength to break through the third layer of talisman array defense. Very consciously, Xiaochen and the others separated from Sharjah and the others. They began to break through the third talisman array defense from 2 different lines of talisman array defense. Although the 2 sides had now joined forces, they definitely couldn't fully trust each other. Therefore, when breaking through the talisman array defense was so dangerous, whether it was Xiaochen and the others or Sharjah and the others, they were obviously prepared. Therefore, they naturally chose to separate. The 8 immortals crossing the sea each showed their remarkable abilities. Whether or not they could break through the third talisman array defense depended on their own abilities. Taking a deep breath, Xiaochen said to Qin Shu, the 3 girls, and Chunling, be careful. With that, the group entered the third talisman array defense. Every step they took was very careful. However, as they continued to advance, the talisman array defense was finally triggered. A red light shot up into the sky, and 100 Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao were trapped by the talisman array on the spot. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 1023. A red light shot up into the sky, trapping Hundred Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao within the array. Qinshu was lucky enough to escape a bit faster than the two girls, or else the three girls would have been trapped within the array. The sudden change caused Xiao Qin's expression to darken. At the same time, Chunling also spoke up. It's a killing array. There were many array formations in the world, and they were of different grades. Their power differed greatly, but generally speaking, array formations could be divided into 4 categories according to their different functions: killing array, trapping array, illusory array, and support array formations. Needless to say, killing arrays were the arrays with the strongest defensive power. Trapping arrays were mainly used to encircle and trap people. Illusory arrays could make people hallucinate. As for auxiliary arrays, they were generally healing array glyphs. Being in an auxiliary array would allow a cultivator to recover faster from their injuries. Of course, there were also auxiliary arrays that could enhance one's strength. At this time, Baihua Fairy and Gu Lingyao were trapped in the red array formation. Although Qianling did not understand what this array formation was, he was sure that it was a killing array. Being trapped in a killing array was the most dangerous thing, and the slightest mistake could cause one's life to be in danger. Hearing Chunling's words, Xiao Chun did not hesitate. He immediately took out a talisman from his storage ring and shot it at the killing array formation. As everyone knew, there were only 2 ways to break array formations. One was to be a formation master and use techniques to break array formations. But if you were not a formation master and were not proficient in array formations, then you could only use brute force to break array formations. There were 2 ways to break array formations with brute force. The first was to use one's own powerful attacks to break array formations. The second was to use a high-grade talisman to break array formations. Both of them used brute force to break the talisman array. However, the difference was that the talisman used to break the array had to be of a higher grade than the talisman used to break the array. Only then could the array be broken. In comparison, using high-level talismans to break talisman arrays was the most mainstream method at present. He shot out a battle talisman. The battle talisman slammed into the formation and exploded. The talisman formation that trapped Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao trembled slightly, and its red glow dimmed a little. It was useful. Seeing this, Xiao Chun threw out 3 similar talismans in a row. There were 4 talismans in total. Moreover, these 4 talismans were all at the saint level. It could be said that each of them was very expensive. An ordinary cultivator might not be able to obtain these 4 saint-level talismans in their lifetime. From beginning to end, Xiao Chun had used up a total of 7 saint-level talismans to forcibly break open the talisman array, allowing Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao to successfully escape from danger. Using talismans to break array formations was not a big deal, but it was too expensive. Thinking about it, Xiao Chun had used up 7 saint-level talismans just for this one talisman array. An ordinary cultivator would not have so many saint-level talismans. It should be known that saint-level talismans were very precious. Moreover, they were usually in the hands of the major sections. If an ordinary cultivator wanted to obtain a saint-level talisman, it could be said that they would go bankrupt. Once they obtained a saint-level talisman, they would usually treat it as a trump card for registration and would not use it lightly. Apart from the holy sons of the quasi-sage sects like Xiao Chun, who had the confidence to use talismans to break array formations, others could only wait for death once they were trapped in array formations. After the talisman array was broken, Gu Lingyao rushed into Xiao Chen's arms and hugged Gu Lingyao's delicate body. Xiao Chun gently comforted her. It's okay now." While comforting Gu Lingyao, Xiao Chen also looked at Fairy of 100 Flowers and smiled gently at her as a form of comfort. It was a close call, but no real danger. However, the group obviously had to be more cautious for the rest of the journey. At the same time, the speed of their progress became even slower. After all, no one knew where the talisman arrays were hidden. Once they were triggered, it would be very troublesome. However, even though everyone was extremely careful, there were too many talisman arrays. Moreover, they were hidden extremely well and were difficult to detect. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the rest quickly triggered the second talisman array and trapped Qinling within. Being trapped by the talisman array again, although Xiao Qin's heart ached, he did not hesitate to use saint-level talismans and forcefully break this talisman array. This time, Xiao Chun used a total of 8 saint-level talismans. Just 2 talisman arrays cost Xiao Chun 15 saint-level talismans. More than half of the talismans that he had accumulated over the years were used up in an instant. Using talismans to break a talisman array could be understood as a competition of resources. Moreover, under normal circumstances, the party that broke the array would definitely have to pay a higher price. For example, a talisman formation master might require 5 talismans to set up a talisman formation. Then the party that utilized talismans to break the talisman formation would at least require 7 or 8 talismans of the same grade, or even higher, in order to be able to break open the talisman formation. Frankly speaking, it was a competition of wealth, a competition of who was richer, a competition of who possessed more talismans. But just think about it. If one were to compete with a talisman formation master in the number of talismans, then one would probably be courting death and tired of living. A talisman array master was not necessarily a talisman array master, but a talisman array master was definitely a talisman array master. Every talisman array master had to learn how to draw talismans. This was the most basic thing. Along the way, numerous arrays soared into the sky. Xiao Chun and the others were constantly trapped within the arrays. Every single one of them had been trapped by the arrays before. In order to break these arrays, Xiao Chun and the others quickly used up all their talismans. Not only Xiao Chun, but Long Qing, Chun Ling, Qin Shu, Hunter Flower Fairy, and Gu Ling Yao had all used up all their talismans. Without talismans, they could only rely on their own strength to force their way through. However, it was clearly extremely strenuous for them to forcefully break through the arrays with their strength. Under normal circumstances, at least 2 to 3 people would need to attack at the same time. Moreover, they would need to attack at least twice in a row to be able to break open a gap and allow the trapped people to escape. After using up all their talismans, the spiritual energy in their bodies was also rapidly depleting. In order to break through the last layer of array defense, Xiao Chun and the others could be said to have used all sorts of methods. The only thing worth rejoicing over was that the arrays that they had encountered so far were not too high level. At the very least, they had not encountered a divine array. Otherwise, with their strength, it would have been very difficult to break through. There were no saint-grade talisman arrays set up here. However, this was quite normal. After all, the Sky Expanse sect had perished, and they naturally hoped that the inheritance they had left behind would be passed down. Therefore, the 3 layers of talisman array defense around the Sky Expanse sect were more to test the challengers than to kill them. Therefore, it made sense that there were no saint-grade talisman arrays set up here. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:24. It was precisely because they didn't encounter any saint-level array that Xiao Chun and the others had a chance of passing through. Otherwise, if they triggered even one saint-level array, Xiao Chun and the others would probably all die here. It could be said that every step was extremely difficult, but in the end, after exerting all their strength, they finally passed through the 3rd layer of array defense safely. Although everyone was injured, Xiao Chun could not help but laugh out loud at the pleasure of escaping from the jaws of death. Previously, when they were surrounded by countless arrays, Xiao Chun's heart was under great pressure. Now that they finally passed through, the joy in his heart was needless to say. His laughter was full of forthrightness. At the same time, Hundred Flower Fairy gently wiped the blood from the corner of Xiao Chun's mouth with her embroidered handkerchief. She charmingly rolled her eyes at Xiao Chun and smiled. "What are you laughing at? Silly." Although she said this, it wasn't hard to see from her expression that Hundred Flower Fairy was filled with joy. At least they had successfully passed through the array defense. Hearing Hundred Flower Fairy's words, Xiao Chun fiercely kissed Hundred Flower Fairy's forehead and said, What's wrong with being silly? Aren't I your husband? Don't waste time. Ling Yao, hurry up and give everyone the healing elixir. With that, Xiao Chun and the others took the healing elixir and began to sit cross-legged on the spot to heal their injuries. Not long after, Sharjah and the others also walked out of the array. They were also injured, and one of the candidates was missing. It was highly likely that he had died in the array. Sharjah and the others' luck was obviously not as good as Xiao Chen's, because they had lost one person. Seeing that Xiao Chun and the others had already passed through the array, Sharjah didn't say anything. He also let the people of the Supreme Deity sect take the healing elixir and began to sit cross-legged to heal their injuries. After nearly 6 hours, both sides had recovered from their injuries and stood up one after another. Everyone's gazes were on the door in front of them. After passing through the third layer of array defense, Xiao Chun and the others had now arrived at the entrance of the Sky Evolution sect. Looking around, they saw a winding mountain path that stretched all the way to the majestic and simple buildings. Now that we've paid so much, it's time to reap the fruits of our labor, Xiao Chun said indifferently with a smile on his face. So many people had died on the way here from the entrance. Moreover, everyone had experienced a narrow escape. Now that the Sky Evolution sect was in sight, as long as they passed this path, they would reach the Sky Evolution sect. Xiao Chun couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation in his heart. He didn't know what kind of opportunity would be waiting for him in the Sky Evolution sect. However, if he wanted to obtain these treasures of the heavens, he would have to defeat the Chosens of the Supreme Deity sect, SS. When he heard Xiao Chen's words, Sharjah smiled and said, "Let's go. We can't let those guys from the Heavens Go sect and Li Wang's sect wait for too long." As they spoke, the group walked along the mountain path. They didn't encounter any more dangers along the way, and the array formations that were impossible to guard against had completely disappeared at this point. It should be noted that Xiao Chun and the others were now inside the Celestial Expanse sect. Here, the Celestial Expanse sect would definitely not set up any talisman matrices. After all, the disciples of the Celestial Expanse sect had to live here in the past. If they set up talisman matrices in the sect, one could imagine the consequences if a disciple accidentally set off. Therefore, Xiao Chun and the others no longer needed to worry about the danger of falling into the talisman matrices here. They no longer had to be cautious with every step. As a result, the group's pace became much more diligent. The seemingly winding mountain path reached its end in a short time. At the end of the mountain path, a huge red wall appeared in front of them. As long as they passed through this wall, they would be able to enter the Sky Evolution sect. However, at this moment, there were 2 identical doors in front of Xiao Chun and the others. They didn't know where these 2 doors led to. After some discussion, Xiao Chun and Sharjah decided that each party would enter through a door and meet up after entering the Sky Evolution sect. After making a decision, each party entered through one of the doors. Xiao Chun and the others entered through the door on the right. After passing through the door, they arrived at a small courtyard. The courtyard was already desolate and overgrown with weeds. Moreover, the shape of the courtyard was very strange. It wasn't an ordinary square or rectangle, but a circular shape. At the end of the courtyard, there was a door that led to an unknown place. After scanning the surroundings, Xiao Chun didn't find anything valuable in the courtyard. He didn't linger and directly entered through the door, heading towards the depths of the Sky Evolution sect. After leaving the circular path, they arrived at a long corridor. There were many houses on both sides of the corridor. It seemed like this was the place where the disciples of the Sky Evolution sect used to live. Of course, this was only the periphery of the Sky Evolution sect. Those who lived here should be the ordinary disciples of the Sky Evolution sect. The higher-ranked core disciples or direct disciples should live in the deeper parts of the Sky Evolution sect. After searching through a few houses, although they did find some treasures, Xiao Chun and the others didn't care about them. After thinking about it, how could the outer core disciples have any amazing treasures? Therefore, in the end, Xiao Chun was too lazy to search. Instead of wasting time on the outer court disciples' houses, it was better to go deeper into the Sky Evolution sect as soon as possible. That was the place where they could find the real inheritance and treasures. Since they stopped searching, Xiao Chun and the others naturally moved faster. After passing through the outer court disciples' residential area, Xiao Chun and the others found a small garden that was protected by a formation. Since it was protected by a formation, it should be an important place. Fortunately, after the erosion of time, the formation that originally protected the garden didn't have much power. Although it was a divine-grade formation, Xiao Chun and the others didn't have to spend much effort to break it. Since the ancient times, even a divine-grade formation couldn't withstand the erosion of time. Otherwise, Xiao Chun and the others wouldn't have been able to break this divine-grade formation. After breaking the formation, Xiao Chun and the others filed out. As soon as they entered, they were stunned. This is the Sky Evolution Sect's Garden. In this courtyard, there was an extremely small area that was neatly divided. At a glance, they knew that this should be the place where the elixirs were stored. What a pity! After looking around, Xiao Chun said somewhat gloomily. Because of the passage of time and the lack of care, the elixirs in this herb garden had already withered. It was indeed unpleasant that so many elixirs had withered. However, just as Xiao Chun finished speaking, Xiao Chun suddenly saw nearly 100 green, grass-like plants that were still full of vitality on the smallest soil in the depths of the garden. For a moment, Xiao Chun couldn't help but walk forward quickly, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 10:25. Just a second ago, Xiao Chun was still feeling depressed because these spiritual herbs had withered due to years of neglect. But in the next second, he quickly walked towards the nearly 100 stalks of wild grass with a look of disbelief and ecstasy on his face. Xiao Chun wasn't unfamiliar with these nearly 100 plants that looked like weeds. Back in the wind plain of the Sky River continent, Xiao Chun had seen them before. After walking closer and observing carefully, Xiao Chun finally determined that these nearly 100 stalks of weeds were not weeds at all, but the incomparably precious Italian grass. Meaning grass, for any warrior, it was probably an extremely precious spirit grass. It could enhance a warrior's concept power, which was absolutely enough to make any warrior go crazy. Xiao Chun had seen grass in the wind plain of the Tiana continent and had refined it. It was at that time that Xiao Chun's sword intent had improved. He had personally experienced the benefits of grass. So at this time, Xiao Chun was so excited that he didn't know what to say. Last time, only one herb of meaning had given Xiao Chun such great benefits. At this time, in front of Xiao Chun, there were a total of 97 herbs of meaning. What kind of concept was this? It was no exaggeration to say that these 97 herbs of meaning were enough to raise the artistic conception of everyone present by a level. Oh, no wonder, she said excitedly. After so many years without anyone taking care of it, the other spiritual grasses in the herb garden had withered and died. Only the herb of intent had survived. Indeed, only the herb of intent could survive in such a situation. As everyone knew, the Italian herb was known for its tenacious vitality. Often, the more barren and dangerous a place was, the more traces of the Italian herb could be found. Therefore, for so many years, no one took care of the herb garden. This had no effect on the growth of the Italian herb at all. In the Sky River continent, the meaning grass could only be found in places like the Wind Field and the 100,000 Fire Domain. This also proved the tenacity of the meaning grass. However, the growth cycle of the meaning grass was too long. A stalk of meaning grass needed at least a few hundred years to mature. Moreover, before it matured, the meaning grass had no use at all. Such a long growth cycle also led to the scarcity of the meaning grass. It could be said that it was priceless. And in the Sky Expanse sect, there was no doubt that it was the best growing environment for the meaning grass. Since ancient times, this place had been isolated from the rest of the world. So naturally, no one had ever seen these nearly 100 stalks of meaning grass. Xiao Chun was overjoyed. He then made a decision to let everyone refine the herbs on the spot. Not to mention anything else, even if they were only able to obtain these herbs this time, it would already be a worthwhile trip for them. Therefore, Xiao Chun directly expressed his thoughts. Hearing this, Long Qing, Qin Shuoro, and the other girls naturally wouldn't refuse. Chun Ling said calmly, I don't need the herb of will. You guys can refine it. I'll be your protector. After all, this place isn't safe. No one knows when the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect will appear. Chun Ling had no interest in the meaning grass, nor did he need it. Hearing this, Xiao Chun did not react at first, but he quickly understood the reason. Chun Ling was the reincarnation of an almighty. He did not need the meaning grass to increase his power of conception. Because his subconscious perception was still there, the meaning grass was useless to Chun Ling. It was a pure waste. It was better to leave it to Xiao Chun and the others. Indeed, he did not need the meaning grass. Therefore, these 97 stalks of meaning grass were naturally divided between Xiao Chun and the others, while Chun Ling protected them. Without hesitation, Xiao Chun and the others began to refine the meaning grass on the spot. Eyes closed. Now that Xiao Chun's sword intent was at the level of small perfection, he believed that with the help of the meaning grass, his sword intent would definitely be able to break through to the level of great perfection. In this way, Xiao Chun's battle strength would increase by another step. This would obviously be of great help in the future when he fought with the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect's Holy Son. It was also because of this that Xiao Chun chose to refine the meaning grass on the spot. Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Qin Shu, 100-Flower Fairy, and Gu Lingyao all closed their eyes and sat cross-legged as they began to refine the meaning grass. Chun Ling also found a clean place to quietly protect the five of them. It could be said that these meaning grass were the first bucket of gold for Xiao Chun and the others. Xiao Chun and the others had obtained great benefits. On the other side, Sharjah and the others had entered the Celestial Expanse sect through another gate. They had also broken through the outer disciples' residences and gradually entered the Celestial Expanse sect. Because Xiao Chun and the others were refining the meaning grass, Sharjah and the others were now in a position that was even further ahead than Xiao Chun and the others. At this time, Sharjah and the others came to a large hall, which was also protected by a talisman array. Sharjah and the others broke the talisman array and entered the hall. After searching for a while, Sharjah and the others were so happy that they could not close their mouths. This hall was actually the place where the Tian Yin sect stored all kinds of talisman paper and talisman brushes. As far as the eye could see, there were many raw materials used to inscribe talismans all over the hall. Although most of them could no longer be used due to the age, there were still many that had been preserved. As these talisman papers and talisman brushes were things passed down from ancient times, their value was obviously not low. Moreover, with these things, the talisman masters of the Supreme God sect could obviously use them to inscribe talismans in the future. Sharjah was extremely excited as he had also obtained the first bucket of gold for this trip. Immediately, he ordered the 4 candidates of the Sky Saint sect to collect all the talisman papers and talisman brushes that could be used and bring them back to the Supreme God sect in the future. Sharjah said excitedly as he collected the talisman papers and talisman brushes. It seems that our luck is pretty good. I wonder if Xiao Chun and the others have found any treasures. Sharjah felt that their luck was pretty good to have obtained so many talisman papers and talisman brushes. In his opinion, the Supreme God sect's harvest should be greater this time. After all, Xiao Chun and the others were not here, so these talisman papers and talisman brushes obviously belonged to the Supreme God sect and did not need to be distributed to the Sacred Palace. Sharjah originally thought that he had profited greatly, but if he knew that compared to the 97 herbs that Xiao Chun and the others had obtained, the talisman papers and talisman brushes that Sharjah and the others had obtained were simply like chicken ribs. One had to know that the herbs were treasures that could truly increase a cultivator's battle strength. But what about these talisman papers and talisman brushes? They were only raw materials used to inscribe talismans, and could not even be compared to real talismans. If Sharjah and the others had found finished talismans, It could indeed be said that they had dug up a treasure. Unfortunately, Sharjah and the others had only found some talisman papers and talisman brushes. Compared to the 97 herbs that Shao Chun and the others had obtained, it was simply like the difference between heaven and earth. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 10:26. They thought that they had obtained some amazing benefits, but little did they know that the talisman papers and brushes that Sharjah and the others had found couldn't be compared to the 97 herbs of will that Shao Chun and the others had obtained. They were still happily collecting the talisman papers and brushes. They really wanted to see what kind of expression Sharjah would have if he knew that Shao Chun had obtained 97 herbs of will. Unfortunately, such a scene was destined not to be seen because Shao Chun definitely wouldn't tell Sharjah, just like how Sharjah wouldn't tell Shao Chun about the existence of the talisman papers and brushes. Both parties were working together, but at this time, the other party was not present. Therefore, the treasures obtained naturally belonged to their own side. After all, no one would be so stupid as to give away something that they had already eaten to the other party. Sharjah was like that, and so was Shao Chun. Therefore, it was destined that neither side would know what benefits the other party had obtained. Sharjah and the others collected the talisman papers and brushes in the hall, and then continued to explore the secret territory of the Sky Expanse sect. At the same time, the chosen from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect also entered the Sky Expanse sect in two different directions and began their search. It could be said that the chosen from the four great quasi-sage sects had already entered the Sky Expanse sect. However, because of the Sky Expanse sect's layout, the four great quasi-sage sect had separated and gathered in the central hall of the Sky Expanse sect from four different directions. The four paths advanced together, and in the end, the saints of the four quasi-sage sects would meet in the Heaven Expanse sect's central hall. In the next few days, the saints of the Supreme Deity sect, the Night Ghost Pavilion, and the Power King sect searched the Sky Expanse sect from three different directions like bandits entering a village. They turned the entire Sky Expanse sect upside down. At the same time, as the three parties continued their search, they obtained more and more treasures left behind by the Sky Expanse sect. They were also getting closer and closer to the central hall of the Sky Expanse sect. On the other hand, Shao Chun and the others were still in the herb garden, even though a few days had passed. However, after refining for a few days, Shao Chun's sword intent was already on the verge of a breakthrough. After refining more than 20 herbs of will, Shao Chun's sword intent was finally about to break through to the perfection realm. In order to help Shao Chun successfully break through to the perfection realm, Long Qing, Qin Shu, and the other two girls took the initiative to give more herbs of will to Shao Chun to ensure that his sword intent could break through to the perfection realm. Shao Chun was touched by the kindness of the four girls, but he did not refuse. With their relationship, there was no need to be calculative about this. Similarly, if Shao Chun found the treasures that the four girls needed one day, Shao Chun would also give them to them without hesitation. However, even if they gave more herbs of will to Shao Chun, there were still 97 herbs of will here. Therefore, after Shao Chun's sword intent broke through to the perfection realm, Qin Shu, the other two girls, and Long Qing's sword intent also broke through to the perfection realm. This was a situation that everyone was happy about. Holding his breath and concentrating, a fierce sword intent uncontrollably rose from Shao Chun's body into the sky. After this power of sword intent appeared, it began to soar all the way. Under the scouring of this spiritual power, the ground around Shao Chun was also cut open. He had finally succeeded in breaking through to the great perfection realm of sword will. This great perfection realm was already the limit of the power of wills. Beyond that, there would be another kind of brand new power. Of course, that power was still a little far from Shao Chun's. After successfully breaking through to the perfection realm, Shao Chun was in a good mood. In the next few hours, After Long Qing and the other two girls had refined all the remaining herbs of will, their power of sword intent also broke through to the perfection realm. After all 97 herbs of will had been refined by the 5 of them, their power of sword intent had also been improved. After the 5 people's power of sword intent had broken through, Xiao Chun and the others finally went deeper into the Tianyin sect. Because of refining the herbs of will, Xiao Chun and the others were delayed for a few days. Therefore, at this time, the progress of Xiao Chun and the others was obviously much slower than the holy sons of the Supreme Deity sect, the Night Ghost Pavilion, and the Liwang sect. At this time, the 3 sacred sects were about to reach the central hall of the Tianyin sect. Once again, they began to move forward. The closer they got to the Tianyin sect's mansion, the more good things Xiao Chun and the others found. Of course, after leaving the herb garden, Xiao Chun and the others did not encounter any more treasures that made them excited. After Xiao Chun and the others had walked for a long distance, they found a hall protected by a talisman array. After blasting open the talisman array, Xiao Chun and the others in the hall were completely stunned. There weren't many of them, but there were at least 200 to 300 martial skills of various grades placed in the hall. Obviously, this should be the Tianyin sect's martial skills pavilion. Although the Tianyin sect was famous for its talisman arrays, a sect would definitely have some martial skills in stock. Perhaps the martial skills pavilion was not the true core of the Tianyin sect. Similarly, after a rough look, Xiao Chun and the others were not shocked by the martial skills collected by the Tianyin sect. The highest martial skill in the entire Tianyin sect's martial skills pavilion was only a heaven-level upper-grade martial skill. Moreover, there was only one such martial skill, and its power was not considered top-notch among the heaven-level upper-grade martial skills. Therefore, it was not very attractive to Xiao Chun and the others. However, even if Xiao Chun and the others were not interested in these martial skills, it would obviously be a huge improvement to the Sacred Palace's foundation if they could bring it back. After all, even if Xiao Chun and the others were not interested in these martial skills, it did not mean that the disciples of the Sacred Palace were not interested in them. Moreover, the number of martial skills a sect, especially a human sect, had in stock would directly affect the strength of the sect. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiao Chun waved his hand and stored the martial skills collected by the Tianyin sect into his storage ring. With 97 herbs and hundreds of martial skills, Xiao Chun and the others had really profited greatly this time. Even if they left the Tianyin sect's secret realm now, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely have profited greatly from this trip. After collecting the martial skills, Xiao Chun and the others checked through them. After making sure that they did not miss anything, they left the hall and continued to head toward the Tianyin sect's central Great Hall. While Xiao Chun and the others were heading towards the Tianyin sect's central Great Hall, the Supreme Deity sect group, led by Sharjah, had already arrived at the Tianyin sect's central Great Hall. A huge platform supported the Sky Expanse sect's central hall. As long as one climbed up the stone steps, they would be able to reach the central hall. At this moment, Sharjah said indifferently as he looked at the Sky Expanse sect's central hall in front of him. Just one more step, and I will be able to obtain the Tianyin sect's most precious symbol array inheritance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 10:27. Along the way, Sharjah and the others had indeed obtained many treasures from the Sky Expanse sect. However, they still hadn't seen the Talisman Array Master's inheritance, which was the greatest treasure of the Sky Expanse sect. Sharjah guessed that the Talisman Array Master's inheritance, which was the foundation of the Sky Expanse sect, must be in the central Great Hall. The Talisman Array Master's inheritance was the most coveted treasure of the Sky Expanse sect. In other words, all the other treasures of the Sky Expanse sect added together couldn't compare to the Talisman Array Master's inheritance. This was the true foundation of the Sky Expanse sect. Right now, the true foundation of the Sky Expanse sect, the Talisman Array Master's inheritance from ancient times, was right in front of Sharjah and the others. Sharja's eyes flashed with unconcealable excitement, but other than that, there was also a strong desire to battle. This was the final step, and they were only one step away from the true foundation of the Sky Expanse sect. Sharja was also very clear that the battle with the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect's chosen was about to begin. Sharja's guess was right. At the bottom of the other two stone steps leading to the central Great Hall, the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect's chosen had also arrived. The chosen of the three quasi-sage sects had all gathered in the central Great Hall of the Sky Expanse sect. Only Xiao Qin's group hadn't arrived yet, but they weren't far away. Sharja quickly reined in the excitement in his eyes. He knew that the outcome of this battle was still uncertain. After all, the Holy Sons of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect were not easy to deal with. Everything was still unknown. Let's go. Sharja, Ku Sual, and Jiaolingya, the three holy sons and holy daughters, led the group of people from the supreme deity sect up the stone steps. At the final juncture, Sharja, Ku Sual, and Jiaolingya's expressions turned grave. At the same time, the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect's group also started climbing the stone steps from the other two directions. The stone steps were not long, and they did not encounter any obstructions. Therefore, after a short dozen breaths, the saint sons and prospective saint sons of the three major quasi-saint sects arrived at the central hall. At the same time, they finally met. Almost at the same time, they stepped onto the stone steps and arrived outside the central main hall. At this moment, the doors of the central main hall were tightly shut, and in the huge square outside the main hall, the various saints of the three quasi-sage sects met. The Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect had already formed an alliance, so when they met, they naturally walked together. They looked at Sharja and the people from the Supreme Deity sect with cold smiles. On the other hand, Sharja did not react at first when he saw the Night Ghost Pavilion and Power King sect members. But when he realized that the Sacred Palace members were nowhere to be seen, his expression darkened slightly. Xiao Qin and the others were not here. Sharja did not think that the Supreme Deity sect alone could deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect. That was simply impossible. Moreover, when he looked in the direction of the Night Ghost Pavilion and saw the leader of the group, Sharja's eyes unconsciously revealed a trace of unconcealable fear. This time, the Night Ghost Pavilion had sent a total of 2 saints. One was a young man, and the other was a little girl who looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. The young man was clearly the leader of the two. He looked at the leading holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Even though his skin was pale and his body was thin like the other ghost race members, for some reason, he gave off a different vibe than the other ghost race members. In the eyes of the human race, the ghost race had always looked sinister and terrifying. They were as pale as paper and skinny as bones. This was the most direct description of the ghost race. However, the holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, who was the leader of the Night Ghost Pavilion, was from the Ghost Clan, but he gave off a devilishly handsome vibe. His demonic aura was enough to charm many human girls. It was hard to imagine that a ghost could be associated with the word handsome. However, Sharja's fear of this person was not because of his handsomeness or demonic aura. It was all because of the name Mo Xie. Mo Xie, the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion. The ghost in front of him was Mo Xie, the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion. If the chosen of the North Star boundary were to be divided into 3 levels based on their strength, then there was a total of 3 levels. The difference between the 3rd level and the 2nd level was the greatest. This was because the chosen of a saint-level sect could only be considered a 3rd-level chosen, while the chosen of a quasi-sage sect could be considered a 2nd-level chosen. The difference between the 2 levels was huge. This was not difficult to see from the fact that Xiao Qin could easily kill the chosen of a saint-level sect. If the chosen of a quasi-sage sect could be considered a 2nd-level chosen, then who was the 1st-level chosen? It was the first chosen of the various quasi-sage sections. To put it bluntly, if the chosen of a quasi-sage sect stood at the pinnacle of the younger generation in the North Star boundary, then the first chosen of a quasi-sage sect like Mo Xie stood at the pinnacle of the pinnacle. Although they were both chosen of a quasi-sage sect, the difference between the first and second chosen was not only in terms of status, but also in terms of strength. The first chosen was the symbol of a sect and was the object of worship of all the disciples. Sharjah had not expected that the Night Ghost Pavilion would actually send Moc. When he saw the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Sharjah's heart sank. Although Sharjah was the second holy son of the Supreme Deity sect, in the entire Supreme Deity sect, the only person who dared to say that he could fight evenly with Moc was the first holy son of the Supreme Deity sect, Bishar who was on par with Moc in terms of both status and strength. Moc's appearance, coupled with the disappearance of Shao Chun and the others from a sacred palace, made Sharjah's heart sink. At the same time, Kufa, who was beside Sharjah, was also sizing up the people sent by the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect. Kusuan naturally did not care about the prospective chosen. Instead, he was observing the people at the chosen level. The Night Ghost Pavilion had sent out 2 holy sons. One of them was the first holy son, Moc. The other was a cute little girl who looked to be about 8 or 9 years old. Her name was Gu Changel, and she was the 5th holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion. As for the Liwang sect, they had sent a total of 3 chosen. They were the second chosen, Wang Zhong, the 4th chosen, Li Cheng, and the 5th chosen, Song Wang. The 2 quasi-sage sect had a total of 5 chosen. After the 2 sides met, it was obvious that the 3 chosen of the Liwang sect, including Wang Zhong, were subtly led by Moc. Although they did not completely obey Moc, as the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Wang Zhong and the others were obviously wary of him. Therefore, they naturally gave him the authority to lead. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 1028. The Night Ghost Pavilion, the Power King sect, and the Supreme Deity sect, the holy sons and holy daughters of the 3 quasi-sage sects finally met in front of the central hall of the Sky Expanse sect. Because of their alliance, under the leadership of the Night Ghost Pavilion's first holy son, Moc, the people from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect looked at the Supreme Deity sect with ill intentions. On the other hand, the people from the Supreme Deity sect all had ugly expressions. Shao Chun and the others from the Sacred Palace had yet to appear, which made the Supreme Deity sect members secretly anxious. Without the Sacred Palace, the Supreme Deity sect wouldn't be a match for the Night Ghost Pavilion and Liwang sect. Furthermore, the Night Ghost Pavilion had sent the first chosen, Moc, this time, which made the Supreme Deity sect even more hopeless. The people from the Sacred Palace couldn't have run away after obtaining the treasure, right? Following behind Sharjah and the other Supreme Divine sect chosen, the prospective chosen secretly guessed. In fact, it wasn't just them. Sharjah and the other 2 chosen also had the same guess. There was nothing they could do about it, since the Sacred Palace people still hadn't appeared. Moreover, Sharjah didn't believe that the relationship between the Supreme Deity sect and the Sacred Palace was that strong. To put it bluntly, both sides were working together for their own interests. Moreover, the Supreme Deity sect was the one who had schemed against the Sacred Palace. The Supreme Deity sect had schemed against them and chose to form an alliance. In that case, it wouldn't be strange for the Sacred Palace to withdraw halfway. If the Sacred Palace really withdrew halfway, the Supreme Deity sect would no longer have the power to resist. While Sharjah and the other Supreme Deity sect members were secretly guessing, Moc slowly walked in front of them with a faint smile on his face. What? Bishar isn't here. Bishar was the first chosen of the Supreme Deity sect. Sharjah and the others chose to remain silent with gloomy expressions. Moc didn't mind and continued to smile. Since Bishar isn't here, you guys can stay in the Sky Expanse sect. Moc's eyes flashed with killing intent as he spoke. It was obvious that Moc wanted to kill Sharjah, Kusual, and Jiaolingya in the Sky Expanse sect's secret territory. Moc had the absolute advantage in terms of strength, so he wanted to kill them. If he could really kill Sharjah and the other two chosen, it would be a huge blow to the Supreme Deity sect. Losing 3 holy sons in one go, even the Supreme Deity sect would suffer a great loss. Sensing Mo's killing intent, Sharjah's face sank. Looking at the current situation, it was impossible for the Supreme Deity sect to withdraw. Mo wouldn't let them leave just like that. Sharjah had a certain level of understanding of Mo. As the first holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Mo's strength was unquestionable. However, other than his strength, the most frightening thing about Mo was his personality. If one were to ask who was the most sinister and ruthless among the North Star Realm's quasi-saint sects, Mo was definitely worthy of the title. This was a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. His methods were so ruthless that even many of the current saints of the older generation were somewhat afraid of him. Now that Mo wanted to kill, Sharjah knew very well that the Supreme Deity sect couldn't escape unscathed. They could only fight to the death. In the face of the alliance between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect, the Supreme Deity sect could only fight to the death. However, at this time, the Sacred Palace had disappeared. This made Sharjah's mood plummet to the bottom of the valley. Why are you wasting your breath on them? Kill them. We'll go and get the inheritance. At this moment, the second holy son of the Liwang sect, Wang Zhong, snorted coldly. Wang Zhong's tall and sturdy figure made him look like a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus. Mo didn't refute. He looked at Sharjah indifferently. I heard that. Junior brother Wang Zhong is impatient. Since that's the case, let's do it. Indeed, there was nothing much to say. Originally, the patriarchs of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect had ordered them to kill the holy sons of the Supreme Deity sect on the spot, if they had the chance. Now, although the Supreme Deity sect was led by the second holy son, Sharjah, there were only 3 of them. On the other hand, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect had 5 holy sons, including the first holy son, Mo. They had the upper hand and indeed had the chance to kill Sharjah and the others here. Of course, the prerequisite was that they had to pay a price. However, in Mo's eyes, this price was nothing compared to the lives of Sharjah and the others. It wasn't worth mentioning. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura erupted from Mo's body. This aura was directed at Sharjah. Clearly, Mo's target was Sharjah. Leave Sharjah to me. I'll leave Kusuo and Jialing to you guys. End this quickly, Mo's said calmly as his aura locked onto Sharjah. Hearing Mo's words, Wang Zhong and the other 2 Liwang sect disciples didn't refuse. Then, everyone started a fight. Mo fought Sharjah, Wang Zhong and Song Wang fought Kusuo, and Gu Changel and Li Chung fought Jialing. The battle was about to start. Facing the encirclement of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Liwang sect, Sharjah and the others naturally wouldn't give up. Both sides immediately started to fight fiercely. However, at the same time, Sharjah shouted in a deep voice, "Find a chance to escape." Sharjah had no intention of fighting to the death with Mo, and the others. His goal was very clear, and that was to find an opportunity to escape. Hearing this, Mo struck out with his palm, and a cold smile appeared on his face. Do you think you can escape? It was such a rare opportunity. How could he let Sharjah and the others escape so easily today? The battle broke out, and the result was obvious. In just one exchange, the Supreme Deity sect was at a complete disadvantage. Whether it was Sharjah, the 3 chosen, or the prospective chosen, they were all at a disadvantage. Kusuo and Jialing were surrounded by 2 chosen and chosen at the same time. 1 against 2, the Supreme Deity sect naturally didn't have any advantage. Although Sharjah only needed to face Mo alone, Mo was the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion. His strength put a lot of pressure on Sharjah. He didn't expect the Sacred Palace to flee. Sharjah's heart was filled with bitterness as he fought fiercely. Compared to the despair of those from the Supreme Deity sect, those from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect were filled with fighting spirit. They had finally found their chance. If they killed Sharja and the other two today, they would definitely deal a heavy blow to the Supreme Deity sect. The fierce battle continued. Just as the two sides were locked in a stalemate, several figures arrived at the central main hall from the other side of the stone steps. The leader of the group, a young man wearing a long golden robe, faintly spoke when he saw Sharja's group being surrounded by the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Power King sect. "Brother Sharja, why did you start fighting without waiting for us? Are you in such a hurry? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1029. Brother Sharja, why did you start fighting without waiting for us? Are you in such a hurry? His voice was filled with mockery. However, when Sharja, who was fighting fiercely with Emosia, heard this, a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. The people of the Supreme Deity sect, who had already sunk into despair, seemed to come back to life when they heard this voice. Their eyes were rekindled with hope. Compared to the Supreme Deity sect, it was the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sects turn to be depressed this time. The Supreme Deity sect did not continue fighting. Under Sharja's command, they took the initiative to leave the battle. The Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect did not pursue this matter. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the six figures that had just appeared. There were 2 men and 4 women. The 3 people in the lead were wearing long golden robes. Needless to say, these 6 people were Xiao Chun and the others. Xiao Chun and the others had arrived a little late because they were refining the wool grass. However, they were still in time. Seeing Xiao Chun and the others appear, Sharja and the rest of the Supreme Deity sect felt relieved. For a moment, they completely forgot about the suspicions in their hearts. Sharja even looked at Xiao Chun with a smile and said, "Haha, I was a little anxious. However, Brother Xiao Chun is a little late. I was delayed on the way." Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled and replied. Then, he took the initiative to lead Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others towards the Supreme Deity sect. How could Sharja not know that Xiao Chun and the others must have found some treasures on the way? However, he did not say much. After all, Sharja and the others had also found many good things along the way. This was something that both sides had a tacit understanding of. Moreover, now was not the time to dwell on these matters. The most important task at hand was to deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect. The arrival of Xiao Chun and the others instantly boosted Sharja's confidence. There was no longer the wariness in his eyes when he looked at Emosia. Although Emosia was the number 1 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion and was powerful, and Sharja was naturally no match for him. In terms of the number chosen, with the arrival of Xiao Chun and the others, the Supreme Deity sect and Sacred Palace had 1 more chosen. It was 6-5. The Sacred Palace and Supreme Deity sect had a total of 6 chosen, while the Night Ghost Pavilion and Li Wang's sect only had 5 chosen. Therefore, even if Emosia was present, Sharja was not too afraid. After all, no matter how strong Emosia was, it was impossible for him to fight against 2 chosen of the quasi-saint sects by himself. With confidence, killing intent continuously gathered in Sharja's eyes. Sensing the change in Sharja, the smile on Emosia's face did not diminish. However, it gave off an increasingly cold feeling. Emosia shifted his gaze from Sharja to Xiao Chun and the others. He looked at the golden-robed Xiao Chun and said indifferently, "I've never seen you before. I've never seen you before, but to be treated like this by Sharja, you must be a saint of a quasi-sage sect. In the North Star boundary, there is only one place that I don't recognize. You must be from the Saint Palace, right?" Emosia was certain of Xiao Chun and the others' identities based on his own guesses. Moreover, he was absolutely correct. Xiao Chun did not hide anything from Emosia. He nodded slightly and smiled. "You're absolutely correct. Unfortunately, there's no reward." When the chosen of the Sacred Palace heard the conversation between Emosia and Xiao Chun, Wang Zhong and the other two chosen of the Li Wang sect began to seriously size up Xiao Chun and the others. The sudden appearance of the sacred palace had indeed attracted the attention of the 6 great quasi-saint sections. Therefore, Mo Xie, Wang Zhong, and the others were no strangers to the sacred palace. At least, they had heard many rumors about the sacred palace. It was a quasi-saint sect founded by the human race. According to the information that Supreme Sovereign Aten of the Supreme Divine Sect had personally gone to the sacred palace, there were at least 2 quasi-saint great sovereigns in the sacred palace. As such, the strength of the sacred palace could not be underestimated. Moreover, no one knew if the sacred palace had shown their true strength or if they were hiding something. For the old quasi-saint sects like the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect, the sacred palace was very mysterious. At the same time, they had to admit that due to the appearance of the sacred palace, the situation in the North Star boundary had begun to change. The most direct change was that the original 6 great quasi-saint sects in the North Star boundary had become 7 great quasi-saint sections. Recently, they had heard all kinds of rumors about the sacred palace. Today, they finally saw the chosen of the sacred palace with their own eyes. A cold smile flashed in Mo Xie's eyes as he said, "I didn't expect the sacred palace to be interested in the secret domain of the Tianyin sect. If I had known, the Night Ghost Pavilion would have invited you long ago. When the time comes, the 3 of us can join forces and directly destroy the Supreme Divine Sect. Wouldn't that be a simple matter? However, it's not too late now. What do you think, chosen of the sacred palace? Do you want to join us? The 3 of us can join forces and destroy the Supreme Divine Sect together." He didn't expect Mo Xie to directly sow discord between the sacred palace and the Supreme Divine Sect. However, when he heard this, Xiao Qin's mind was clear and he smiled softly. "The suggestion is good, but I think that after the Supreme Divine Sect is destroyed, the sacred palace will be next." As he spoke, Xiao Chun turned his gaze to Wang Zhong and the other 3 chosen of the Li Wang sect. It was easy to distinguish between the barbarian race and the ghost race, so Xiao Chun could clearly tell that they were disciples of the Li Wang sect and the Night Ghost Pavilion based on appearance alone. Xiao Qin's smile didn't fade as he said to Wang Zhong, "Friend from the Li Wang sect, the ghost race is famous for their ruthlessness. Why don't you join us? After we destroy the Night Ghost Pavilion, we can split the inheritance of the Tianyin sect equally. What do you think? I believe that cooperating with us will be more reassuring than cooperating with the Night Ghost Pavilion." Mo Xie had just sowed discord between the Supreme Divine Sect and the Sacred Palace, and in the next second, Xiao Chun began to rope in the Li Wang sect. Mo Xie's expression finally darkened when he heard this, and his eyes were overflowing with killing intent. "You humans are really sharp-tongued. However, the Sacred Palace is still a newly established organization. Whether you can truly stand on the stage of the North Star boundary still depends on your strength. Then you could give a try. I believe that you won't be disappointed." "Ha, good. Then let me see just how strong the chosen of the Sacred Palace is." Mo Xie laughed heartily and attacked without warning, sending a palm strike toward Xiao Chun. As the number 1 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Mo Xie had chosen to launch a sneak attack without warning. Clearly, Mo Xie had seen through the changes in the situation. If he could severely injure Xiao Chun in one blow, the situation would change completely. Just as Sharjah understood Mo Xie. Although he was the number 1 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, he was indeed an unscrupulous person. Even with his status, he was willing to do something as despicable as launching a sneak attack. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 10:30. As the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Mo Xie had actually launched a sneak attack. This was something that the other first chosen would never do. However, Mo Xie was clearly an exception. In Mo Xie's words, the so-called reputation was meaningless. As long as you were the victor, everything would be written by you. Therefore, the process was not important and the method was not important. Whether it was honorable or despicable, as long as you could win, that was the way of the king. It was also because of this awareness that Mo Xie had always acted without restraint. This was also the reason why many people were afraid of him. Although a fierce tiger was ferocious, it could not be compared to a venomous snake. This was because it was impossible to guard against a venomous snake. You would never know when it would appear, where it would appear, or how it would viciously bite you. You would not even have time to react. Mo Xie was clearly such a venomous snake. However, he was even more terrifying than a venomous snake. This was because, in addition to possessing the viciousness of a venomous snake, he also possessed the absolute strength of a fierce tiger. The sudden attack left no one able to react in time. However, Xiao Chun reacted immediately. Almost at the same time that Mo Xie made his move, the storage ring on Xiao Chen's hand flashed with a bright light, and the black dragon sword appeared in his hand. He slashed out fiercely, displaying the 9 thunderclap swords. The law of force, the law of speed, and the sword will of great perfection gushed out at the same time. The sword tip and the black palm fiercely collided. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Chun had already slashed out 3 times in a row. The 3 sword lights struck the black palm, causing it to slowly dissipate. Mo Xie's sneak attack had also been successfully neutralized by Xiao Chun. Fortunately, Xiao Chun had been secretly on guard. Otherwise, it was very likely that Mo Xie would have caught him off guard and seriously injured him. If that had happened, he would have been in grave danger. Disappointment flashed across Mo Xie's eyes when he saw that his attack had missed. At the same time, he had a higher opinion of the sacred palace chosen, as he thought to himself. It seems that although the sacred palace is only a newly established sect, it does indeed have the strength of a secondary saint sect. The rumors weren't false. The sacred palace wasn't just a facade. However, it was precisely because of this that Mo Xie stopped underestimating them. After all, the appearance of Xiao Chun and the others had caused the Night, Ghost Pavilion, and the Li Wang sect, who originally had the absolute advantage, to fall into a slight disadvantage. Not daring to be careless, Moxie attacked again without saying a word. His target was still Xiao Chun. Seeing this, Xiao Chun was not afraid either. He held his sword and went up to meet the attack. At the same time, Sharjah also shouted loudly, "Brother Xiao, let me help you." Mo Xie was the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Sharjah immediately chose to help Xiao Chun. The two of them attacked at the same time and immediately engaged in a fierce battle with Mo Xie. The 3 of them fought fiercely. At the same time, Ku Suo and Zhao Lingya of the Supreme Sect, as well as Chun Ling and Long Qing of the Sacred Palace, were also engaged in a fierce battle with the 4 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect. The battle broke out once again. Qin Shu and the other 2 girls, as well as the other prospective chosen of the Supreme Sect, had also joined the battle. Compared to the previous battle, the 2 sides were clearly evenly matched. The Night Ghost Pavilion and the Li Wang sect were not as relaxed as they had been at the beginning. After all, based on the current situation, it was hard to tell who would emerge victorious. Looking at the battle between Xiao Chun, Sharjah, and Mo Xie, Mo Xie was indeed unable to gain any advantage against the combined attacks of Xiao Chun and Sharjah. Just as Sharjah had thought, although Mo Xie was strong, he was definitely not strong enough to deal with 2 chosen of the quasi-saint sects at the same time. Although the strength of the first holy son of a quasi-sage sect was slightly stronger, and even the second holy son couldn't be compared to him, there was a limit to how strong he was. After all, at the level of a quasi-sage sect's holy son, it could be said that it was incomparably difficult to make a breakthrough. Xiao Chun and Sharjah were ganging up on Mo Xie, and the pressure on Mo Xie was especially great at this time. Sharjah's divine race remarkable powers, coupled with Xiao Chen's powerful and tricky swordsmanship, made Mo Xie feel that it was impossible to guard against them. The tempered battle body, the great perfection sword will, the precepts of force, and the precepts of speed were all pushed to the extreme by Xiao Chun. At the same time, The long sword in his hand continued to perform one martial technique after another with terrifying power. Beams of sword light streaked across the sky, constantly attacking Emosia. As for Sharjah, compared to Shao Chun, golden light shone from his body, and he also continuously blasted out one divine race remarkable powers after another. Both Shao Chun and Sharjah did not dare to be careless in the fierce battle against Emosia. Both of them raised their battle prowess to the extreme. Even so, the two of them were still unable to do anything to Emosia. Of course, Emosia was also unable to do anything to Shao Chun and Sharjah. For a time, the battle between the three of them was in a delicate state of balance. Neither side could do anything to the other. As expected of one of the few people standing on the altar of the North Star boundary, the two of them were still unable to defeat Emosia, even after joining forces. As the battle continued, Shao Chun also discovered the gap between him, the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, and the first chosen of the other 6 quasi-saint sects. This was the first time since the establishment of the Sacred Palace that Shao Chun had truly fought with someone of equal status. However, it was 2 against 1. Shao Chun was the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, and Emosia was the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion. The Sacred Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion were both quasi-saint sects, and Shao Chun and Emosia were the first chosen of their respective sections. However, in terms of battle prowess, Shao Chun was indeed quite a distance away from Emosia. At least in a one-on-one battle, Shao Chun knew that he was no match for Emosia. It seemed that the position of the first chosen of the Sacred Palace was not so easy. If the Sacred Palace wanted to rise and establish a firm foothold in the North Star boundary, Shao Chun, as the first chosen, had to raise his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he encountered Emosia and the other first chosen of the other 6 quasi-saint sects in the future, wouldn't he be in trouble? They were both the first chosen, but Shao Chun was no match for Emosia and the other 2. This would not only embarrass Shao Chun, but also the Sacred Palace. The pressure in his heart was great, but now was not the time to think about this. His attacks became more and more powerful. The 3 of them were fighting with all their might, and Emosia was also going all out. His entire body was wrapped in purple-black ghostly chi, and his every move was suffused with a pressure that could make one's heart tremble. After clashing head-on with Shao Chun and Sharjah, Emosia took the initiative to retreat. His voice was still calm as he said, "It's useless to continue fighting. We can't determine the winner. Why don't we each take a step back and split the Sky Expanse sect's inheritance between the 4 of us? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1031. Emosia took the initiative to retreat and said that the 4 sects would split the Sky Expanse sect's inheritance equally. Upon hearing this, Shao Chun and Sharjah also stopped what they were doing. Seeing this, the corners of Emosia's mouth curved into a faint smile. While Shao Chun's trio stopped fighting, the Liwang sect's 4th chosen, Li Cheng, who was fighting fiercely with Long Qing not far away, suddenly shouted in shock, "You're from the dragon race?" Long Qing naturally couldn't hold back in a fierce battle with a quasi-sage sect's holy son like Li Cheng. In this way, the aura of the dragon race would naturally be exposed, so it was normal for Li Cheng to sense it. Long Qing, who was also wearing the Sacred Palace Chosen's robes, seemed to have become a different person at this moment. His entire body exuded a strong dragon race aura. As a natural and unique aura of the dragon race, Long Qing appeared even more domineering and arrogant in the face of the dragon race's aura. Long Qing said indifferently when he heard Li Cheng shout, "So what if I'm from the dragon race?" The pure-blooded dragon race was very tempting, but now in the North Star boundary, Long Qing was not too afraid of his identity being exposed because the Sacred Palace had the ability to protect Long Qing. Therefore, Long Qing did not panic when he saw that Li Cheng had recognized his identity. He took the initiative to retreat and did not continue fighting. On one hand, Li Cheng was shocked by Long Qing's identity. On the other hand, Li Cheng sensed that Xiao Qin's trio had stopped fighting. Xiao Qun, Sharja, and Mo Xie could be said to be the leaders of the Supreme Deity sect, Night Ghost Pavilion, and Sacred Palace this time. Now that the three of them had chosen to stop fighting, the people below would naturally not be so foolish as to continue fighting to the death. Everyone stopped fighting one after another and looked in the direction of Xiao Qun and the other two, especially Wang Zhong and the other members of the Li Wang sect. They had already gathered together and were secretly on guard against the development of the situation. Although everyone seemed to be fighting to the death just now, in the end, none of the people present actually trusted each other. They came from different sects, and even if there was a cooperative relationship, it absolutely had nothing to do with trust. While they were engaged in an intense battle, they were also thinking about how to preserve the strength of their side while obtaining more benefits at the same time. Therefore, none of the four secondary saint sects would choose to sacrifice themselves for no reason. It was also because of this that the atmosphere in the square became a little strange. At the same time, under everyone's gaze, Mo Xie looked at Xiao Qun and Sharja again and said, "How is it? There's no point in continuing the fight. Why don't we each take a step back and split the inheritance of the Heaven Expanse sect's secret realm equally? This way no one will lose out." When Mo Xie said this, his eyes flashed with strong confidence, as if he was certain that Xiao Qun and Sharja would definitely agree. Mo Xie was confident, and the source of this confidence was, firstly, his confidence in his own strength. Even in the face of Xiao Qun and Sharja's attacks, if they really had a fight to the death, Mo Xie was confident that he could at least kill one of them. However, he would have to pay a huge price, and, in the end, Mo Xie might even lose his life here. Secondly, it was because of the relationship between Xiao Qun and Sharja. Although the two of them had joined forces, to be honest, this relationship was very fragile. With the slightest change, this relationship was very likely to be broken. It was precisely because of this that Xiao Qun and Sharja couldn't really work together to deal with him. Both of them would definitely take their own lives as the prerequisite. This was because once one of the two of them was killed by Mo Xie, the remaining one would very likely turn hostile and take the inheritance of the Heaven Expanse sect for himself. Both of them were afraid of being stabbed in the back by the other party. Therefore, Mo Xie was certain that Sharja and Xiao Qun would definitely agree to his proposal. After all, this was the safest and best way. Sure enough, as Mo Xie expected, after hearing his words, Xiao Qun said indifferently, "I have no objection." Xiao Qun agreed. In fact, this was also a helpless action. In terms of strength, Xiao Qun was even a little weaker than Sharja. In other words, Xiao Qun's strength was the weakest among the three of them. Once Mo Xie was forced into a desperate situation and wanted to fight to the death, Xiao Qun guessed that there was an 80% chance that Mo Xie would target him. If Mo Xie wanted to kill him at all costs, Xiao Qun indeed wouldn't have much of a chance. Once he was killed by Mo Xie, Sharja would take the opportunity to kill the seriously injured Mo Xie. At that time, the Heaven Expanse sect would dominate. Xiao Qun didn't think that Sharja was a kind person. When the Sacred Palace lost him, Sharja would probably turn hostile on the spot. At that time, even Chun Ling and Long Qing would be in danger. All in all, it was because of distrust. If Sharja was replaced by Chunyu, Xiao Qun would definitely not compromise. He would risk his life to kill Mo Xie because he wasn't worried that Chunyu would stab him in the back. However, Sharja was different. Xiao Qun agreed to Mo Xie's proposal. Seeing this, Mo Xie smiled slightly, then looked at Sharja and said, "Sharja, what about your Supreme Divine Sect? Do you still want to fight to the end?" Sharja wasn't surprised by Xiao Qun's decision. Faced with Mo Xie's question, Sharja had no choice but to nod and agree. This was because Xiao Qun had already agreed. If Sharja didn't agree at this time, it was very likely that the Night Ghost Pavilion, Li Wang's sect, and Sacred Palace would join forces to kill them. There was no doubt about this. After all, who didn't want to get a little more benefits? And with one less power, they would naturally get more benefits. Just like how Xiao Chun didn't trust Sharjah, Sharjah naturally didn't trust Xiao Chun. Therefore, when he heard Mo Xie's words, Sharjah chuckled. Senior brother Mo Xie. Actually, wouldn't it have been better if you had said this earlier? With our relationship, why would we need to fight to the death over such a small profit? If there is something good, we naturally have to share it together. Sharjah agreed. Finally, it was the Liwang sect's turn. In response, the second holy son of the Liwang sect, Wang Zhong, laughed loudly without even thinking about it. Haha, actually, my Liwang sect has always advocated for the peaceful coexistence of the various major sacred sections. I, Wang Zhong, have always treated all of you as my fellow disciples and have never approved of killing each other. Now that we can shake hands and make peace and share the treasures equally, it's naturally the best. My Liwang sect has no objections. Mo Xie, Xiao Chun, Sharjah, and Wang Zhong represented their respective sects and agreed to share the Heaven Expanse sect's inheritance equally, each taking a step back. Gu Lingyao, who was standing between Qin Shru and Fairy of 100 Flowers, curled her lips in annoyance when she saw that the four of them were full of murderous intent a second ago, but were now smiling brightly, as if they were a family. Sister Shui Ro, Sister Baiwa, these people are so hypocritical. I don't believe what they said. Fellow disciples? They clearly looked like they wanted to kill someone just now. Who are they trying to fool? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1032. Gu Lingyao scoffed at Wang Zhong, Sharjah, and the others' hypocrisy. Hearing this, 100 Flower Fairy smiled gently and said, "There's no other way. Everyone has their own thoughts, so this is the only way." After successfully reaching a consensus, the people who were originally going to fight to the death actually shook hands and made peace in the blink of an eye. At this time, the representatives of the four great quasi-saint sects, Xiao Chun, Sharjah, Mo Xie, and Wang Zhong, gathered together. They sized each other up while discussing what to do next. Now, other than the central main hall in front of them, the other places in the Heaven Evolution sect had basically been plundered clean by everyone. Of course, the real treasure was definitely in the central main hall. However, no one knew what they would encounter if they wanted to obtain the greatest treasure in the Heaven Evolution sect. Would the Heaven Evolution sect set up any tests or formations in the central main hall? Therefore, after a discussion, the four of them decided that the people of the four sacred quasi-sects would temporarily join forces to get through the dangers that might exist in the central main hall together. After obtaining the talisman array inheritance of the Sky Expanse sect, they would divide it equally. Of course, the treasures obtained by the four great quasi-saint sects would naturally belong to whoever obtained them. There was no need to divide them equally. Regarding this, the four people had no objections and quickly came to an agreement. Then, everyone came to the central main hall together and looked at the huge palace whose doors were tightly shut. We didn't encounter any danger in the Heaven Evolution sect before, but this is the last place. I don't know what the Heaven Evolution sect will do, but we still need to be careful. Looking at the huge palace in front of him, Mo Xie said indifferently. His signature smile was still hanging from the corner of his mouth. It was a little evil and a little cold. After hearing Mo Xie's words, Xiao Chun and the others beside him responded. It was naturally necessary to be careful. Moreover, not only did everyone have to be careful of any tests or formations that the Heaven Evolution sect might set up, they also had to be vigilant of their every move at all times. This was especially so for Mo Xie. Sharjah and Wang Zhong knew Mo Xie very well. This guy was definitely an expert in playing dirty tricks behind people's backs. The people present who knew Mo Xie the least were probably Xiao Chun and the others from the Sacred Palace. After all, the Sacred Palace had just risen to prominence and had no prior interactions with the 6 quasi-saint sects of the North Star boundary. This was also the first time that Xiao Chun and the others had truly come into contact with the saints of the quasi-saint sects of the North Star boundary. There was no response from the crowd after his words sounded out. However, Mo Xie was not the least bit concerned about this as he took the lead and walked forward. When he arrived at the entrance of the large hall, he slammed his palm forward. A muffled sound was emitted from the large door, before it was slowly pushed open by Mo Xie. After so many years, the central hall of the Sky Expanse sect was finally opened once again. At first, it was pitch black inside the hall, but very soon, rays of light shot out from both sides of the hall. At a glance, it was a small talisman array called the Starlight Array. It had no offensive power, and its only function was to emit light to illuminate the night. Many sects had such a starlight array. These starlight arrays should be connected to the door. Once the door was opened, these arrays would be activated. Looking at the numerous starlight arrays on both sides of the hall, the crowd carefully stepped into the hall. The chosen took the lead, while the prospective chosen followed behind them. They did not know if there would be a test or talisman array set by the Sky Expanse sect in this hall. But since there was a starlight array and it had been activated, the chances of the Sky Expanse sect setting a test in the central hall should be very high. After all, this was related to the inheritance of the Sky Expanse sect, and it was impossible for there to be no protective measures. As they slowly walked forward, they could not see the end of the hall at all. Just as the crowd entered the hall and walked a few steps, a strange sound came from the surroundings, as if something had awakened and was moving its body. As the sound rang out, the crowd stopped in their tracks. At the same time, from the depths of the array, jet-black beast-shaped puppets of various shapes appeared in front of the crowd. Why were these things called puppets? It was because when these things appeared, Mo Xie, Sharjah, Wang Zhong, and the others subconsciously whispered, "Puppets! Puppets!" Xiao Chen had not come into contact with them before, but very quickly, with Chun Ling's explanation, Xiao Chen understood what was going on. In ancient times, there was a special profession called the puppet master. These puppet masters were able to refine puppets through their unique methods, and once they succeeded, the power of the puppet would be very strong. However, because the refining methods were too cruel, over time, the puppet masters were rejected by other cultivators, and they slowly withdrew from the stage of history. When a puppet master refined a puppet, they usually refined it from a living body. In other words, they needed a living martial artist. They didn't kill him, but forcibly refined him into a puppet. Their memories and consciousness would be erased, and they would only listen to their master's words. The entire process was extremely cruel, and the puppet that was refined was somewhat like a beast slave. However, the puppet was already dead and had been refined to death, but it still retained the strength it had when it was alive. On the other hand, a beast slave was still alive, but its consciousness had been erased. Moreover, puppets could be refined from any race, but a beast slave could only be refined from the beast race. Moreover, only the beast race could use it, and other races could not cultivate it. Many puppets that had withdrawn from the stage of history had actually appeared here, and the beast-shaped puppets before them were clearly refined from the beast race, and they retained the strength they had when they were alive. There were a total of 23 puppets, and one of them was at the half-saint realm, and the others were at the Tao Emperor realm. Looking at the 23 puppets, Mo Xie was the first to speak with a smile. "I didn't expect to encounter puppets. This is a divine ability that has been lost for a long time. I wonder if the Heaven Expanse sect has records of it." Mo Xie obviously yearned for the method to refine puppets. If he was able to obtain it, then he would be able to become a puppet master. At that time, he would be able to refine some puppets that would become his servants, and he wouldn't have to worry about them betraying him for his entire lifetime. A wisp of surprise flashed through his eyes, but it quickly returned to normal. He paused for a moment, and then he looked at the half-saint realm puppet in the lead and spoke with a smile. "Leave that half-saint realm puppet to me, and I'll trouble all of you to deal with the others. Is that all right?" Mo Xie was the strongest amongst all the holy sons present, so they naturally had no problem with him taking the initiative to deal with the half-saint realm puppet. All of them nodded. Emosia was the first to charge out when he saw this, and he looked at the half-saint realm puppet and said with a smile, "I've never fought a puppet before, so I wonder if it's really as strong as recorded in the ancient books. It just so happens that I'll personally give it a try today." Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1033. Everyone present had more or less read about puppets in various ancient books and had some understanding of them. However, due to the fact that they were lost, this was the first time that they had seen one. Therefore, not only Emo Xie, but Xiao Chun and the rest were also very curious about puppets. With Emo Xie being the first to make a move, Xiao Chun and the other Chosens quickly made their moves as well. Everyone charged towards the puppet and quickly engaged in a fierce battle with it. The Chosens fought the puppets, while the remaining candidates followed closely behind. The Chosens basically fought a puppet alone, while the candidates fought a puppet together. Just like that, another great battle began in the hall very quickly. Xiao Chun chose a lion-shaped puppet. Based on the aura it emanated, it was probably at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, and it was 2 realms higher than Xiao Chun. As soon as Xiao Chun came into contact with this lion-shaped puppet, he discovered that this puppet was truly hard. Its entire body was like a rock, and when the ink dragon sword slashed at it, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Refining a living body, and after being refined into a puppet, one's strength would generally be stronger than when they were alive. This was also why the path of puppetry had developed so quickly in ancient times. The ancient era was known as the darkest era. At that time, all the great clans and sects would refine puppets. Especially the clans that didn't need guards, they only needed puppets. The reason was very simple. Firstly, the strength of a living guard was inferior to that of a puppet. Secondly, one did not have to worry about a puppet betraying them. Thirdly, raising a puppet was obviously much easier than raising a living person. There was no need to give it any medicinal pills or any cultivation resources. If one were to ask what made a puppet inferior to a living person, it would be that the puppet could not improve. After all, once a person was refined into a puppet, they would not be able to improve their cultivation when they were alive. Living beings would not be able to make any breakthroughs. This was the only disadvantage of a puppet. After being refined into a puppet, their combat strength would be even stronger than when they were alive. Under the circumstances that their cultivation remained the same, their combat strength would increase instead. There were only 2 reasons for this. Firstly, after being refined into a puppet, it would lose its intelligence, so it would naturally not feel fear. It would be a battle machine in battle that did not fear death. As a result, its combat strength would naturally be even stronger under the circumstances that their cultivation remained the same. As for the second reason, after being refined into a puppet, it was because it was already dead. Coupled with the various techniques of puppet masters, the puppet's body would be even tougher than when it was alive. It was practically no different than steel, so its combat strength would naturally be stronger as well. Xiao Chun found that martial arts techniques below the heaven level were unable to do much damage to the lion-shaped puppet. Even martial arts techniques above the heaven level were only able to leave a shallow sword mark on the puppet's surface. If he wanted to heavily injure it, he would be able to break through its tough skin below. In other words, if Xiao Chun wanted to defeat this lion-shaped puppet, he would have to use his strongest attack. It was indeed very difficult to deal with. Furthermore, it was certain that this lion-shaped puppet was definitely not a top genius of the beast race when it was alive. However, now that it had been refined into a puppet, it was actually able to fight Xiao Chun to such an extent. This was all thanks to the puppet's super strong defensive ability. It was no wonder that puppetry was so popular in ancient times. Indeed, the investment was far less than the gain. Thinking about it, all it took was a living cultivator and a puppet master to refine it. Not only would they not have to worry about betrayal, but they would also be stronger than when they were alive. Furthermore, they would not have to waste any cultivation resources on it. Although the process of such a huge report was cruel, in the hearts of some people, it was obviously insignificant. However, Xiao Chun was only curious about puppets. He did not have much interest in them. Firstly, this method was too vicious. Xiao Chun did not want to deal with it. Secondly, Xiao Chun had always believed that one's own strength was true strength. External forces were illusory. When it came to crucial moments, one's own strength was what mattered. However, once one relied too much on the puppet's strength, one would naturally become lazy. This was not good. After exchanging dozens of blows with the lion-shaped puppet, Xiao Chun basically understood its characteristics. Now that his curiosity had been satisfied, Xiao Chun could not be bothered to waste any more time with this lion-shaped puppet. Not a bad method. However, it's a pity that it conflicts with the Great Tao. It's just a crooked method. The path of puppetry was indeed exquisite. However, it conflicted with the Great Tao. Moreover, its methods were cruel. In the long run, it would harm others and oneself. This was probably the reason why the path of puppetry would eventually be destroyed. With that, Xiao Chun changed his previous probing method and attacked with all his strength. He planned to directly destroy the lion-shaped puppet. Just as Xiao Chun attacked with all his strength and was about to kill the lion-shaped puppet, Mo Xie, who was fighting the only half-step saint puppet nearby, secretly glanced at Xiao Chun. A trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. No one noticed Mo Xie's gaze. At the same time, Mo Xie slowly approached Xiao Chun as he fought with the half-step saint puppet. In the eyes of everyone, Mo Xie was just moving unconsciously during the battle. However, they did not know that Mo Xie was doing this on purpose. He was deliberately approaching Xiao Chun. Originally, there was a distance of several hundred meters between the two of them. However, under Mo Xie's deliberate approach, the distance between Mo Xie and Xiao Chun was less than 50 meters very quickly. For chosen of Mo Xie's level, this distance was something that could be ignored. No one noticed Mo Xie's actions, including Xiao Chun. At this moment, Xiao Chun had already severely injured the lion-shaped puppet in front of him. He only needed one final blow to completely destroy it. With everyone's attention on the lion-shaped puppet, Xiao Chun swung his sword again. He instantly executed the thunderclap, 9 swords. This would be the final blow. The moment Xiao Chun swung his sword, Mo Xie knew that this was the best opportunity. Without any hesitation, Mo Xie blasted away the half-step saint puppet, entangling him with a palm strike. Then, he turned around and charged directly at Xiao Chun. At the same time, purple-black ghostly chi revolved around his palm as he slammed it forward. Sacred Palace chosen, you're still too inexperienced. Die. Mo Xie sneered as his attack arrived as expected. Xiao Chun was completely unprepared for the sudden sneak attack. It was too late for him to react. He had no choice but to take Mo Xie's attack head-on. If he did, Xiao Chun would definitely be severely injured even if he did not die. He never imagined that Mo Xie would be so despicable as to launch a sneak attack under such circumstances. It was as if he had already seen what would happen next. However, at this moment, a white figure suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Chun and blocked Mo Xie's palm strike for Xiao Chun at the critical moment. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1034. Mo Xie suddenly launched a sneak attack while Xiao Chun was engaged in a fierce battle with the puppet. This sudden turn of events caused everyone's expression to change drastically, especially the Sacred Palace group. Long Qing roared angrily. You're courting death. No one had expected Mo Xie to attack Xiao Chun at this time, so no one had the time to react, even though they were furious. Just when everyone thought that Xiao Chun would be seriously injured by Mo Xie, a white figure appeared and blocked Mo Xie's sneak attack for Xiao Chun. This white figure was none other than Xiao Chun's wife, Qin Shuru. In fact, Qin Shuru had inadvertently discovered Mo Xie's movements. When he saw Mo Xie slowly approaching Xiao Chun, Qin Shiru instinctively became vigilant. Therefore, the moment Mo Xie attacked, Qin Shu, who had been secretly on guard, stepped forward and blocked the attack for Xiao Chun without hesitation. One must know that Mo Xie was the Night Ghost Pavilion's first chosen. Even Xiao Chun would not dare to be careless when facing an all-out attack from Mo Xie, let alone Qin Shu. Therefore, when the purplish-black palm hit Qin Shu, Qin Shuru's body was sent flying like a cannonball, and he spat out several mouthfuls of blood. Given Qin Shuru's strength, the price he had to pay to block Mo Xie's attack, or rather, the damage he had to suffer was obviously much more serious than Xiao Chen's. After all, Qin Shuru was not as strong as Xiao Chun in terms of cultivation, and there was even less of a comparison in terms of physical strength. Mo Xie had already seriously injured Qin Shuru with a single attack, and he had even almost killed him. However, Mo Xie was not happy about this at all. Seriously injuring or killing Qin Shuru did not affect Mo Xie at all. He only cared about Xiao Chun. Unfortunately, Qin Shuru had blocked the attack and lost the initiative. Now that Xiao Chun had recovered from his shock, it was impossible for Mo Xie to succeed in another sneak attack. Therefore, after his attack failed, Mo Xie decisively retreated and stood more than 10 meters away from Xiao Chun. He stared gloomily at Xiao Chun without saying a word. He knew very well what the consequences of his sneak attack would be. Now that he had failed and injured Qin Shuru, Xiao Chun would definitely be furious. Therefore, Mo Xie was prepared to deal with Xiao Chen's anger. Everything had a price. Mo Xie knew this very well. Sure enough, after Mo Xie retreated, a terrifying aura arose from Xiao Chen's body. Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Mo Xie. He wanted nothing more than to fight Mo Xie right now, but Xiao Chun was more concerned about Qin Shuru's condition. After taking Mo Xie's attack head-on, Xiao Chun was very worried about Qin Shuru's injuries. At the same time, in the face of this sudden change, everyone attacked with all their might and killed the puppets on the spot. Then, they secretly raised their guard. Chun Ling, Long Qing, Gu Ling Yao, and Fairy of 100 Flowers all came to Xiao Chen's side. Then, Xiao Chun did not stay any longer. He turned around and rushed towards Qin Shuru. Qin Shuru, who had been sent flying, crashed into the wall of the main hall and fell to the ground. At this moment, he was lying more than a meter away from Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun wanted to rush over to check on Qin Shuru's injuries, but just as he turned around, a light blue talisman array light shot up to the sky from where Qin Shuru was. Upon seeing the talisman array, Xiao Chen's expression changed drastically. Without hesitation, he dashed towards Qin Shuru. But to everyone's surprise, even though Xiao Chun reacted immediately, he was still one step too late. Under the cover of the talisman array, Qin Shuru's body quickly disappeared from the main hall. When Xiao Chun arrived, Qin Shuru was nowhere to be seen. In the blink of an eye, Qin Shuru was gone. Looking at the empty ground with only a pool of blood left, Xiao Chen's eyes were full of confusion. At the same time, Chun Ling subconsciously spoke. Teleportation Talisman Array. The talisman array that enveloped Qin Shu just now was a teleportation talisman array. Who would have thought that there was actually a teleportation talisman array hidden in this main hall? And when Qin Shuru was blasted away just now, he inadvertently activated the teleportation talisman array. No one knew where Qin Shuru was teleported to because it was a one-time use teleportation talisman array. It could be anywhere in the North Star boundary. In the vast North Star boundary, try to find a person's whereabouts was tantamount to looking for a needle in a haystack. For a moment, Xiao Chun was in a rare state of panic. His eyes were full of confusion. He didn't know where Qin Shuru was sent and if he was safe. Moreover, Qin Shuru's current situation was extremely bad. He didn't have the strength to protect himself at all. Any Dao Transformation Realm warrior was enough to take Qin Shuru's life. Xiao Chun, who had always been calm, didn't know what to do for the first time. He stood in place without saying a word. His heart was full of confusion and worry. After being lost in thought for a while, Xiao Qin's rationality was finally swallowed up by panic and hatred. Xiao Chun didn't have any other thoughts. He just wanted to vent his anger and kill the culprit, Mo Xie. Xiao Chun suddenly turned around. Everyone present was shocked by his action. But soon, they discovered that Xiao Qin's face had become extremely ferocious. His eyes were red and flashing with intense, killing intent. Xiao Chun had completely forgotten about the current situation. His blood-red eyes locked onto Mo Xie. Mo Xie was slightly taken aback by Xiao Qin's gaze. He couldn't sense the slightest bit of rationality from Xiao Qin's eyes. There was only madness and killing intent. Has he gone mad? Mo Xie thought to himself. He guessed that Xiao Qin couldn't take the blow and went crazy. In the current situation, it wasn't good news to have to face a madman. Mo Xie thought so. However, Xiao Qin didn't give him much time to think. He spat out the word kill in an extremely cold voice. Xiao Chun immediately attacked Mo Xie. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, the storage ring in his hand flashed. Xiao Chun immediately rushed towards Mo Xie. At the same time, he slashed out with a black dragon sword. He directly used the 9 thunderclap swords. His perfect sword intent, the law of force, and the law of speed gushed out without reservation. Mo Xie's face darkened when he saw Xiao Chun rushing towards him like a madman. However, he didn't give it much thought and immediately chose to counterattack. Xiao Chun and Mo Xie fought fiercely in the Great Hall. Watching the battle between the two, the other members of the Sacred Palace and Night Ghost Pavilion prepared to join in. As for the Supreme Deity Sect and Li Wang's sect, they took the initiative to retreat. They clearly wanted to be spectators and didn't intend to interfere in the matters between the Sacred Palace and Night Ghost Pavilion. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 1035. He immediately engaged in a fierce battle with Mo Xie, going all out from the get-go. In the face of the battle between Xiao Chun and Mo Xie, the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect both took the initiative to retreat. Logically speaking, the Supreme Divine Sect was allied with the Sacred Palace, while the Li Wang sect was allied with the Night Ghost Pavilion. At this moment, Xiao Chun and Mo Xie were locked in a fierce battle. Both sides should obviously lend helping hand. However, both the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect tacitly chose to watch from the sidelines. This was to be expected. Frankly speaking, everyone's alliance was for their own interests. Xiao Qin clearly wanted to fight to the death with Mo Xie. In this way, if the Sacred Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion could both suffer losses, the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect would naturally benefit. Not only would they be able to split the Sky Expanse sect's inheritance equally, but they might even be able to kill Mo Xie, Xiao Chun, and the other chosen here. It would be a huge blow to the Sacred Palace and Night Ghost Pavilion strength. Everything was for their own interests. Only a fool would take action at this time. However, while watching from the sidelines, the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect were also on guard against each other. If one side chose to attack, the other side would definitely not sit idly by. Maintaining a balance was a prerequisite. Therefore, as long as the other side didn't attack, everything would be fine. Although he knew what the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang's sect were thinking, Xiao Qin couldn't care less. Qin Shiru's fate was unknown, and all of this was caused by Mo Xie. At this moment, Xiao Qin only had one thought in his mind, and that was to kill Mo Xie. Xiao Qin had already pushed his flawless body to the limit. His body glowed with golden light, but in a one-on-one situation, Xiao Qin was clearly at a disadvantage. There was indeed a gap in strength between Xiao Qin and Mo Xie. However, Xiao Qin, who was almost in a frenzy, didn't care about this disadvantage at all. He fought with his life on the line. Facing Mo Xie's attack, Xiao Qin didn't dodge. Even if he was injured, he would risk his life to kill Mo Xie. It could be said that Xiao Qin did not care about his own life. But Mo Xie could not do the same. In fact, Mo Xie could not even exchange injuries for a life. Because once he was seriously injured, what could he do even if he killed Shao Chun? He had no doubt that if he was seriously injured, the Supreme Deity sect and Li Wang's sect would definitely take action. How could they miss such a great opportunity? Because he understood this, Mo Xie was very conservative. He wouldn't casually fight Shao Chun head-on and exchange injuries for injuries. Although Mo Xie would definitely gain an advantage in the end, he wouldn't do that. It was precisely because of this that although Shao Chen's strength was not as good as Mo Xie's, he was still able to fight Mo Xie to a standstill. Of course, this was only temporary because from the current situation, Shao Chen's injuries were obviously more serious than Mo Xie's. If this went on for a long time, Shao Chun would definitely lose in the end. Seeing that Shao Chen's injuries were getting worse and worse, he still had no intention of stopping. At this time, Chunling looked at the other holy maiden of the night ghost pavilion, Gu Chang'e. Chunling's eyes flashed coldly as he said to Long Qing, "Second sister, I'll leave Gu Chang'e to you. I'll go help third brother, Bai Hua, and Ling Yao deal with the prospective holy princes of the night ghost pavilion. Let's go." He didn't think of persuading Shao Chun. From Shao Chen's current situation, it was useless. Since that was the case, Chun Ling and the others could only accompany Shao Chun in battle. Moreover, Mo Xie's actions had indeed angered everyone. As Chun Ling's voice fell, the others nodded and attacked at the same time. Long Qing directly punched Gu Chang'e, while Bai Hua Fairy and Gu Lingyao rushed towards the prospective holy princes of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Everyone attacked. Chun Ling also attacked Mo Xie without hesitation. He joined forces with Shao Chun and attacked Mo Xie together. This time, the Night Ghost Pavilion had only sent 2 holy princes. Although they had Mo Xie, the first holy prince, there was still one less holy prince. At this time, the Night Ghost Pavilion's disadvantage in numbers was completely revealed. If Mo Xie and Shao Chun were to fight one-on-one, Mo Xie was confident that he could defeat Shao Chun. However, with the addition of Chun Ling, the pressure on Mo Xie suddenly increased. The situation had completely changed. Chun Ling's strength was originally not weaker than Shao Chen's. In addition, he was the reincarnation of an almighty. Compared to Shao Chun, his attacks were even more difficult to defend against. Moreover, Shao Chun and Chun Ling were sworn brothers. The relationship between the two of them was extremely deep. When the two of them joined forces, they didn't have to guard against each other at all. They could attack with all their might, unlike when Shao Chun and Sharjah joined forces. They had to guard against each other, so they held back when they attacked. With the two brothers joining forces, Mo Xie, who originally had the upper hand, found it difficult to gain any advantage. Facing Shao Chun and Chun Ling's simultaneous attacks, it was almost impossible for Mo Xie to win. Even if he managed to kill one of them, he would definitely not have an easy time after that. He might even have to exchange his life for his own. He had never imagined that Shao Chun would be so crazy. He didn't care about anything else at all. From the looks of it, it seemed that he would not rest until he was dead. Because of his sneak attack, things had developed to this point. Mo Xie couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He felt that he shouldn't have attacked Shao Chun earlier. Not only had his sneak attack failed to hurt Shao Chun, it had even angered Shao Chun. Just like last time, he and the rest of the Night Ghost Pavilion were in a dilemma. They didn't dare to fight to the death with the Sacred Palace, but they also had no way of appeasing Shao Chun's anger. In addition, the Li Wang sect, which could be considered an ally, had no intention of intervening at all. They simply watched the development of the situation from the sidelines. There was some regret in his heart, but since things had already come to this, there was no point in saying anything. While blocking Shao Chun and Chun Ling's attacks, Mo Xie turned his head and said to the second holy son of the Power King sect, Wang Zhong, "Junior brother Wang Zhong, hurry up and attack. Don't forget that we're allies. It won't do you any good to let the Sacred Palace take advantage of us." Mo Xie had no choice but to berate Wang Zhong. However, Wang Zhong smiled faintly when he heard Mo Xie's words. Senior brother Mo Xie, it's not that I don't want to attack, but I have to guard against the supreme divine sect. The burly Wang Zhong, who looked simple and honest, seemed like a cunning fox at this moment. Mo Xie's face darkened when he heard this, and he cursed in his heart. Damn it! Guard against the supreme divine sect? Who was he trying to fool? He was lying through his teeth. There was no doubt that once the situation changed, the Li Wang sect and the supreme divine sect would join forces without hesitation. When the time came, the two sects would join forces and take down the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Sacred Palace, who had both suffered great losses. In the end, they would become the biggest winners this time. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.